Hello and welcome to the show. My name is Ryan, and joining me today I have Griffin. And today we are going to talk a little Gundam, or a lot of Gundam, actually.
Yeah, usually.
Almost all of it. I
Yeah.
feel like we're going to cover a fair amount.
Yeah, you and me, Gundam Rabbit Hole.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot there.
This is kind of going to be a slightly more casual conversation. The topics we're going to try and aim to cover today are, what is a Gundam? How did we get into Gundam? How can you get into Gundam? And, why you kind of should, at this point, get into the franchise. Over 40 years old, so many opportunities to hop in. There's at least one Gundam anime that aired per generation of anime fans, I feel like. It's kind of hard to avoid at this point.
And yet, there are so many vocal opinions out there, especially in like the world of anime fandom, who haven't or won't, or even believe that it's just too impenetrable, like it's too difficult, like there's too much there. And we're here to assure you that there's not too much. Actually, there's just enough, and there's always more coming down the pipeline. But yeah, I mean, it's like the gift that keeps on giving.
So Gundam is a really, really huge franchise. But what would you say makes a Gundam a Gundam?
Yeah, so Gundam is, oh geez, a Gundam. It depends on the show, right? I mean, Sunrise has been making this series, this franchise for like 40 years, and each show definitely has its own definition on what is.
Yeah,
or
sometimes
is
it's
not.
an acronym, sometimes it's not an acronym. It's just
Right.
two words put together. Other times it's just a made up word.
Sometimes it's the material that they're made out of.
Oh yeah.
I mean, there's a different one, but obviously, I mean, it's not really it's not really the important part and soul of Gundam. The robot's there and it facilitates a story.
Generally speaking, most of the time I feel like they're white with like a blue or red trimming
and a V fin.
The V fin, right?
Yeah.
But spiritually, I feel like the Gundam also represents something a lot of the time. Again, depending on the narrative that it fits in.
Right.
But
within the Gundam universe, all of the robots kind of do that. They kind of play this.
Definitely.
They play this like marionette kind of game with the characters. The characters have their personal. There's political issues. There's personal issues between all the characters, and the robots play this kind of the all the world's a stage, and the Gundam is the player of the theatrical dynamics of the world of Gundam.
But I guess you could say, generally speaking, the Gundam is the main white robot.
Sure.
With, the occasional splashes of red, blue, or yellow. Most of the time, I think, if not almost always, except for like a couple I feel like one in the case of Turn A, most of the time the Gundam will have something called a V-fin, which is that little V-shaped antenna. On the Barbados, it's less of a antenna, more of kind of like horns. But usually it's the white robot in the series, and sometimes there are other robots also considered Gundams.
And there's usually a mean red robot.
Yes, there's always like a red one somewhere in there.
Sometimes there's, I mean, different robots, different colors, different characters, different dynamics. But yeah, there's always a good guy white robot and a bad guy red robot. No, not always, but
most of the time.
Most of the time.
I feel like if it's not red, it's probably purple.
Okay.
or blue.
Or okay. Some of them did, especially in the early days of the UC universe. The color started to change a bit.
But
we should talk about universes a little bit then.
First, I actually wanted to ask you, how did you get into Gundam?
Oh, sure. I got in the way I think a lot of kids in North America did, through Cartoon Network, through Toonami, reruns of Gundam Wing. I think was a gateway drug for a lot of kids in the 90s. They even like made toys just for the West.
Oh yeah,
the battle damaged Gundams.
I think I've seen some trailers like on YouTube and stuff like that.
Yeah. So I mean, it was a big push, and we were smitten. What was great about Gundam Wing for us at the time is we're running around on the playground, and there's like 5 or 6 different heroic Gundams. Obviously, one's more of a hero than the others, but there was enough for all of my friends to have a different robot.
Yeah,
which was like pretty awesome.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, really, really fun. And like the model kits started to trickle over here and stuff like that. It was a cool time. Good year. What about you?
I wasn't born yet when it was airing in the 90s.
Word.
And so I got into it via VHSs.
Okay.
In Koreatown, there's a market and there's a VHS rental store inside the market.
What shows do they have VHS tapes for?
King of Braves, Gal Geiger, and Die Brave, and Firebird.
Okay. Which Gundams?
0079, like the first two movies.
Wow. Okay.
Then they had the Ideon movie,
Mm-hmm.
08th MS Team,
Mm-hmm.
Stardust Memory, War in the Pocket. They had like this whole anime section, but sometimes they would be subtitles not in English but in Korean.
Wow.
And I'm pretty sure most of them were actually just bootlegs.
Yeah,
but
of course.
it was still like my first purview into it. Oh, and
do you
they
remember
had,
the very first one you watched?
it was either 08. Oh no, it was SD Gundam.
It was SD Gundam.
Yeah, I think it was SD Gundam.
Mhm.
I remember that. And then like 08th MS Team, and that
Which
was like
what
the first.
was the old SD Gundam even like? I've only seen the one that's Three Kingdoms themed.
Honestly, I can't tell you. It's like it's just like pictures in my mind.
Yeah.
But
how young were you when you saw these?
I was like 5 or 6. Man.
Yeah,
I was
okay.
like
These
tagging
are, like,
along,
formative,
like tagging along
experiences.
with my grandma to like
Yeah.
the grocery store or something like that.
Yeah.
But they had like GPX Cyber Formula. They had like the weirdest things.
They had good stuff. That's what it sounds like. They had the good stuff.
But yeah, so I watched Gal Geiger and like the first two 0079 movies, and then 08th MS Team, and then I kind of got more into the franchise again in middle school because then I was like picking up the model kits and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, where are these from? And then that was right around the time where YouTube was still like you could still post the anime episodes,
Right.
but like in 4-part.
Yeah, you watch it in like part 1 through 5 or whatever, something like that. Yeah.
Right. And yeah.
And sometimes you get to like a part of the episode where part 3 is missing, and so you just
right,
have to
and then you just
straight
gotta
to
jump to 4,
And you're
and
like,
then it's
that's
like,
what-
okay, I gotta just
it is
figure it
what
out.
it
It's
is,
just
yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah.
But
Those are the good old days.
Yeah.
Although we'll say us 90s kids with cable were totally spoiled. We did have anime shops like on the east side in Metro Detroit. And I would go to them and I would look at all the VHS tapes, but they were really expensive back then.
yeah, I bet.
They were super expensive. So we would wait weeks and months to find out what would happen on some of these shows sometimes instead of by
The only places that you can like usually get them here in like California is like Chinatown or
Right.
Little Tokyo or wait for a convention or something like that, or like order it online. That's like what a lot of people, I feel like in the early days of the anime community, would just have to do, was just order everything online. And that kind of contributes to, I think, why the hobby was so expensive early on.
Yeah, it totally was. What I remember especially, and this is such a bright memory in my mind, is that specifically you could basically like pay to win to get ahead of the shows if you were willing to buy the VHS tapes. Otherwise, you were stuck like following, because they would only do one episode. You know what I mean? And sometimes they would replay earlier sections. And so if you wanted to get further ahead in a plot line, this was especially true for Dragon Ball Z. If you wanted to ever find out what happened after Nappa dies, you had to buy the VHS tapes, because it would take. It could be 2 years before Toonami
decided to air it, or had the rights to air it. Like
right.
it clears like the ratings board or
Instead
whatever.
of just playing like Raditz through Nappa over and over.
You know what?
Again.
I feel like I do remember growing up and seeing those, but also for like DVDs, especially for Dragon Ball Kai, because Kai was airing like when I was in like middle school, and this is definitely like, oh, call now, get the DVD, and it's only like 3 or 5 episodes, and you had to buy like essentially like 6 of them, which is like 2 box sets just for one arc.
Yeah,
which is
I don't know if it's like this anymore, but I remember the Sunrise DVDs, the official DVDs for Cowboy Bebop, like the collection was like $90 or something stupid.
That's
like
insane.
That. Yeah, it was so crazy.
That's
like the early 2000s was such an expensive time to be an anime fan.
I would advocate for digital media, but seeing as the trends, like, I mean, this might date the video, but this video is going to be dated anyways. But seeing how digital trends are going now, maybe buying up physical media is the move again. But I think we're getting a little off topic. But getting in how we got into it.
Those are important parts of the.
You got into it
text,
via Toonami in the 90s on Cartoon Network,
right.
and I got it via the VHS Underground Railroad.
Totally.
But that brings us to the next question: is how do you get into it? A lot of people, as you mentioned before, make this series sound like it's absolutely impenetrable, like it's just too massive or too dense. Like,
Yeah.
I think a similar perception
I actually,
is,
yeah. Is there even a show? I can't think of another.
I think a
anime that
similar
has-
perception in the West is kind of like with Star Trek.
Yeah,
With a lot of
okay.
people, it's like,
Okay.
oh, Star Trek has been airing since the 70s.
Yeah.
It's just too much to
Right,
get into.
right.
It's like, what do I have to watch to understand what's going on in Star Trek lore?
Right.
I
I think sometimes people act a little bit this way about One Piece as well. But at least
Yeah.
One Piece is still on, so it seems like people are getting into it just because it feels like it's still modern.
and keeps going and stuff like that.
Right. But in general, I'm shocked at how
I think another example is kind of like Western comics, especially like the big two,
Right.
or maybe the big three with Image, Marvel, and DC. Even for a lot of Western fans or just people in the West, they find it difficult or intimidating to get into DC lore or Marvel lore because these are ongoing stories or ongoing lore. It's the same lore that has kind of existed and stayed relevant to these characters since their inception, either back in the 1930s or 40s or whatever. And I think Gundam is kind of in that same boat where it's just like, for a lot of people, it's just so massive, has been going on for so long that they really think it's impenetrable. But
yeah.
I would argue that's like a very false perception, especially, and also for the case of comics, it's kind of a false perception. And Star Trek is definitely a false perception. I feel like it's really easy to get into Star Trek, and it's just as easy to get into comics, or in this case, in this video, Gundam.
Yeah.
And
I do think that it helps if you clear up a few of the misconceptions. I think a lot of people are confused and turned off, just not being able to tell. I remember when I was a kid, even, like, I guess I've been down the rabbit hole a long time now, but back at the time, I was shocked to find out that Gundam Wing didn't have anything to do with Gundam. There's Gundam and Gundam Wing, and they're completely separate things.
So I think that's an excellent point you bring up, which is another point of confusion, and it's also kind of how I feel like it relates back to comics, where comics have multiple timelines or multiple universes and stuff like that. Gundam also has that kind of going on. There is the main original timeline called the Universal Century Timeline, or UC. That's where essentially a majority of the Gundam stories are set, and most, if not all, other spin-offs or additions to the Universal Century or spin-offs from the Universal Century in the alternate timelines or alternate universes pretty much readapt or reinterpret or invert the tropes that were initially introduced in the Universal Century back in 1979 with the original Mobile Suit Gundam anime created by, I have it in my notes, Yoshiko Tomino, Yoshikazu Yasuhiko, Kunio Okuwara, and their team at Studio Nippon Sunrise, which was later absorbed into Sunrise, and then Bandai bought them now, so it's Banrise now. But I have it here. Originally, it aired for 43 episodes before it was canceled for low ratings or low viewership. Which is very, very similar to Star Trek in that case, because
there are a lot of similarities.
Both of them are science fiction, soap opera, or space opera-esque shows.
Both of them introduce little elements of hard sci-fi into like a genre that was otherwise very fantastical.
They're kind of pioneers of their genre at the time.
Totally.
And both of them were canceled, and then both of them were eventually brought back due to fan outcry.
Yeah.
But I think the main takeaway is that if you want to get into the main Universal Century or the main continuity, there are easy ways to do that. But at the same time, if you just want to dip your toes into what Gundam kind of is or might be, then the alternate universes or the spin-offs are very easy. They're usually self-contained, and they're also good ways of just kind of introducing yourself to Gundam as a franchise. As a whole,
and we usually get a new one every couple of years as well.
Oh yeah,
which helps, I think.
I feel like there's a pattern of you get one UC project and then one spin-off, and then one UC project, one spin-off, or back and forth type stuff.
One thing that builds on the old lore, and one thing that
adds to new lore,
creates a whole new thing.
But I think there's no better place to start really than the Universal Century itself. So getting into the Universal Century, I would recommend, honestly, just if you're a fan of animation and you don't really care about old animation, stuff like that, just go ahead and watch the original 1979, or maybe not the 1979 anime, sorry, the 1981 movie, Mobile Suit Gundam 1, and then its sequel, Soldiers of Sorrow, and then 1982's Encounters in Space. My argument for this is, one, they're compilation films, so you're going to get the entire content of the anime anyways. And then 2, since the anime was canceled, it has an ending that's for a canceled anime, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Versus when you watch the movies and you get to the 3rd movie, Encounters in Space, that is essentially like the true ending to the 1-Year War,
Right.
And like Amuro's saga in that sense.
Right.
Also, because most of the 3rd movie is actually new footage, just so they can have an ending.
Right.
Is there any point that you would argue this?
I do think that there is a certain whimsy, like a certain kind of old school elegance to the 1979 anime, but I definitely don't think it's as penetrable. If we're talking about easy to get into and enjoyable to get into, I gotta stand with you on that one. The movies are probably more digestible and a little more fun, maybe too. But I will say that compilation movies exist in anime. There's a lot of them, and I always think that when they take episodic content, the plot gets really, really wobbly and wonky.
I think a really good example, especially in recent days, is like Shin Ultraman and Shin Kamen Rider. Those are kind of like live action compilation films almost.
Sure.
And they're definitely paced like it and they feel like it.
Yeah.
And for someone who comes into the franchise that may not necessarily have every single detail for every narrative or plot aspect or plot point,
right.
It can kind of feel like you get a little lost.
Yeah.
I will give the Gundam compilation films the caveat of they do kind of flow pretty well for compilation movies.
And they also established the pattern too.
Yes, definitely. Every kind of major trope that you will, for the most part, that you'll necessarily see throughout the rest of the Gundam franchise, whether it's the Universal Century or an alternate timeline universe, kind of starts in 0079.
Right. But even just like the pattern of making compilation movies, like these movies and Do You Remember Love from Macross,
right,
basically are like the face that launched 1,000 ships. I mean, they even
I still think to this day, Do You Remember Love is the best compilation film ever made.
Yeah, sure. I agree with that. But I also think, these properties are the dividing line between 70s anime and 80s anime. And they exist to propel anime into the golden age, right? They like exist as that platform through which anime evolves into like its next form. Frieza's lost his horns,
Another entry point into the Universal Century I think people might take is through Mobile Suit Gundam The Origin.
Yeah.
Whether it's the Origin movies or the anime. The Origin actually shares its name with the manga, Mobile Suit Gundam The Origin. The manga covers kind of everything, including what is in the movies and the original trilogy of movies as well, and reincorporates a lot of the things that Tomino didn't necessarily get to put in to the original anime and movies, apparently.
I think that they're more oriented towards, and I haven't read the original book, the original novelization that Tomino wrote to go with the 1979 anime. It was actually the first thing, I think, localized Gundam-wise in the West. I think that they introduce even more hard sci-fi elements than the original series had. And I think Origin follows suit with that a little bit.
Yep. The manga did start its run in 2001,
which is old now.
Which is pretty old now, considering.
But it looks great. I mean,
it looks fantastic. Yeah. And if for any manga readers out there and that want to get into Gundam, that's also another perfect way of just getting into there.
Yeah. If you're a manga reader, I actually do think that is the place to get in.
We're not necessarily going to talk a lot about the manga side of Gundam because that's a whole nother rabbit hole that you can just get completely lost into. But definitely, if you are off put by 70s and 80s animation, but you're perfectly fine with like older style manga and stuff like that, just go ahead and read the Origins manga and you'll get the entire story. You'll get everything you need to know.
Right. Probably in a more polished way, actually, and the pacing's better.
The art is fantastic.
Art's fantastic.
And I think
the characters are introduced, I think, in better ways too.
Yeah, it's hardcover too.
Yep.
So they're really nice. They're really nice. Yeah. But as for the anime and the movies, for the movies we have the Origin 1, Blue-Eyed Castfall, the Origin 2, Artesia's Sorrow.
That's one thing about Origin in general is if Gundam follows the good guy main character, Origin tends to follow the bad guy main character.
Yeah. And then Origin 3, Dawn of Rebellion, Origin 4, Eve of Destiny, Origin 5, Clash at Loom, and then Origin 6, Rise of the Red Comet. These 6 movies were released from 2015 to 2018, and then in a kind of reverse compilation kind of effect, I don't know how to really phrase it, but the Origin anime Advent of the Red Comet from 2019 essentially takes these movies and breaks it up into anime episodes.
Right.
I don't think you can really go wrong with.
Yeah, they're all good.
They're
And
both.
I think it poses an interesting experiment too. It's a little bit like showing your kids or showing your friends the Star Wars prequels before showing them the originals. It has an interesting possible effect to see how people react to it.
Do you machete cut it, or do you just go in, chronological release order, or in order of how
the story
is chronologically?
Right. Because Origin does have a lot of flashbacks to before the main events of the.
Well, Origin in its entirety takes place before the events of 0079. I think Origin ends. The end of Origin is when Char Aznable, who is the enemy ace in 0079.
That's how it is in the anime that I've seen. But the stuff that I've read from the manga covers the events from 0079, I think, as well.
Yeah, that's what
sorry,
you were talking about earlier.
Okay,
I was just talking about the anime in this case.
Right. Yeah, I'll mix up.
But I think there's no real wrong answer necessarily. I think if you watch the Origins and then go from the Origins into 0079, still really rewarding. Or if you watch 0079 and then watch the Origins, it's just as rewarding in that case.
Right.
I will say this: I kind of do like the 2019 anime a little bit more
than the manga.
No, then the movies.
Oh, then the movies. Okay.
Because there's the movies and then there's the.
There is some added content, right?
I believe so. There's something they added a little bit here and there.
Expanded it.
But
a little ways.
My thing is, the reason I like it so much is, Beyond Time. The opening.
Okay.
Which is the ending song from Char's Counterattack.
Yeah.
So Char's Counterattack is usually acronymed as CCA.
Char being the titular bad guy, the red robot man. Yeah.
And originally introduced in 0079, he's the main character of the Origins movies and anime.
Right.
He shows up a lot, actually. He's
a bad dude.
In Zeta, he's mentioned in Double Zeta. There's a lot of mangas and guidance that Tomino wrote. He's like Tomina's favorite character.
Yeah. I think the only character who shows up almost the same amount of times is Bright.
Yeah.
And Bright has like a lot.
Bright has a lot of cameos.
Yeah. And not just cameos, but sometimes he's like a supporting character.
Yeah, or like integral to the entire plot.
Right. Bright's the captain character. He's like
Captain Bright.
Captain Bright Noah.
Lieutenant Bright.
Lieutenant Bright Noah.
Yeah. And then he was the original captain of the White Base.
Right.
He's like 19 years old. Like that's one of the major plot points of Gundam is that a lot of the times these soldiers are just like teenagers.
Thrust into a position in which they have to pretend to be adults and like savage and
I think
fight
in
people,
0079 before the introduction of Rumble Raw, like Char was the oldest like recurring character we had seen up until that point.
Yeah, maybe that
like other than like the super old captain that they drop off at like the medical
Rebel
base.
Or no, that's another guy.
Yeah, not Rebel.
That's not Rebel.
No, Rebel was in the Origins, and then he got sent back to the Earth Federation as part of this part of a bargain. Essentially, it was a prisoner exchange, I believe.
Deacon's in the original anime though, or not? Sorry, not Deacon. The zombie guy.
Dozel?
No, Dozel, Garen, their dad.
Oh yeah. What is his name? Dang, what is his name? I can't remember.
I can't remember right now. But he's in it a lot. I feel like he is.
He's always been in it.
Yeah. I'm just saying that he's old. Sorry. He's old.
I guess what I was trying to say was like recurring.
Sure.
Like regular recurring. And also his screen time is he shows up and then the next time he shows up, he doesn't show up anymore.
Yeah.
It's
true.
But
it's like a world full of children that have to fight one another to live.
Oh, yeah. And it's like all our problems are solved by the young generation or something like that. But yeah, I don't think there's necessarily an issue if you go from the Origins into 0079 or 0079 into the Origins.
Right.
There was a new addition to the 1 Year War. Not really a new addition, more of a kind of a readaptation in 2022. Yes. Mobile Suit Gundam Doan Kukuru's Island.
Okay, yeah.
Or Kukuru's Dawn's Island. Which is a remake of a filler arc from the original 0079 movie that was cut from the compilation films. I believe it's set between the first and second film. and it uses the modern animation technology.
It's really good looking. It's very handsome.
It kind of just looks like the Origins.
Yeah.
Again.
Yeah, it does look like Origin.
Yeah. And if you're
it's directed by Yas, which is
if you're more of a fan of modern animation, then maybe just start with the Origins as you're like dipping your toe into space politics and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Fair warning though, in the Origins, there's not the Gundam doesn't fight.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Gundam doesn't fight in the Origins.
One of the least Gundams.
Yes, that's very true. I think the only other one that is like one of the least Gundams is like MS Igloo.
Yeah.
Which
definitely no Gundam in Igloo.
I think that's a perfect transitioning point. MS Igloo.
I love Igloo.
But would you recommend it though as a starting point for Gundam?
Never. Not in the slightest. Not even as a joke. Any normal person watching Igloo would, I think, be confused as to what it has to do with literally anything. But it is awesome. I mean, the writing's great. Like it's so creative.
I think definitely MS Igloo is made for people that are already invested into like the Universal Century timeline, or just like the Gundam franchise as a whole. They're just already more invested into it.
Yeah. So Igloo is basically, there's a good guy faction, there's a bad guy faction. The bad guy faction, much like the Nazis, are obsessed with wonder weapons. So each episode of Igloo is about like a different miracle weapon that the Zeon, the kind of the bad guy faction, is going to invent and is going to solve all their problems in the war.
You know what I just realized? We didn't talk about who the sides are in the Universal Century or the 1 Year War.
We have not.
So the 1 Year War is okay. So first, Gundam uses a lot of historical events to anchor its timeline or anchor its narrative, essentially. And the 1 Year War is the major event in which the events of the Gundam trilogy
revolve
around, essentially. And a lot of the not spin-off, but the OVAs set in the Universal Century, a lot of them also do kind of take place either in the 1 Year War,
around it, after
or
it.
Yeah, exactly.
Briefly within the couple of years of the 1 Year War.
And then the Origins, the anime, just leads up until the day of the 1 Year War.
Pretty much, yeah. And in the 1 Year War are basically like space separatists who are trying to form their own space government.
The two sides are the Earth Federation, or the Earth Federation forces, or the Earth Federation Space Force.
Yeah, EFSF.
And that's the Earth sphere, essentially.
Yep.
And there's these space colonies, and space colonies is a constant thing that shows up. It's a recurring thing that shows up across almost every Gundam.
And by this time in the future, there are so many of them.
Yeah,
it's never even specified how many of them there are, but there are so many.
I think there's 13.
I think that,
but then like they always add more.
Yes,
it's like, oh, this is a secret colony. Or it's like, oh, we forgot about this one. This was a prototype colony that drifted out of orbit or whatever.
But a huge percentage of the human population now lives
in space. Like a majority of people live in space.
These are like orbital cylinders that live in space.
So one of these space colonies essentially votes democratically to secede from the Earth Federation because they say, hey, we're in space. Why should they call themselves space noids? Why should space noids, be under the legislation and government authority of Earth noids? Like that's what they call each other. And essentially that movement is kind of co-opted by this group known as the Zabi family. And they form the Principality of Zeon. And the Principality of Zeon uses the independence movement as their
springboard.
Their springboard of essentially space fascism.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
But they also take advantage of the fact that people in space have developed a lot of really ambitious new pieces of technology.
Yeah. So the space technology is far more advanced than the Earth technology.
Right.
And that's demonstrated very early on that the Zakus are the first real mobile suits, technically.
Right. Mobile suits being the giant robots.
Yeah. The general terminology is like in Gundam is like mobile suit or mobile armor or stuff like that. And the Earth Federation is kind of behind, and it's this major arms race to catch back up. And the Gundam, like the RX-78-2, which is what is piloted in 0079, is the big prototype.
It's their attempt to catch up.
Yeah.
And that's Amuro's, the good guy's robot, big white robot.
And,
there's a lot of build up too, because there's so much lore now. I mean, Igloo's a little bit about building the robots. Origin very much tackles a lot of the building of the robots and like how the robots get built, why the robots are
like
even viable.
Secret R&D facilities and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Another common trope I think we should at least mention at this point is
Minovsky particles.
sure Minovsky particles in so Minovsky particles in 0079 is a byproduct of the Minovsky mini fusion reactor. And there's an actual formula within the Gundam lore of what the Minovsky formula is, and it's just a much more efficient nuclear fission or fusion.
Right. This is really fun. They actually publish
they,
books.
The math kind of works.
Yeah, they publish books of all the fictional science and technology from the Gundam universe. I think they do this a little bit in the Star Trek world as well. I think very much parodied in Galaxy Quest. Galaxy Quest. We could definitely do a Galaxy Quest style thing for Gundam because there's that much there. But Minovsky particle is what legitimizes robot fighting, basically.
Right. It allows them to move like in 3 dimensions in space. It's it what generates power essentially. It also the Minovsky particle field is also makes it so you can't have radio waves. It like interferes with radio waves. So they have to kind of go back to basics in certain forms of technology.
Right.
And that's why you have a
long-range
lot of
ballistics don't work.
Wire guided weapons. And then later, which was actually the topic I wanted to introduce first, was new types.
New types.
So new types is something that was originally introduced in 0079. Not really in the beginning, more towards the end. If you start with the origins, this is also a concept that shows up in the origins kind of more early on. New type theory is the belief that humans will evolve, or the next step of human evolution will be catalyzed by us living in space and just going about our lives in space. And if we experience more trauma in space, we're more likely to develop new type abilities or be new types or become new types or stuff like that. There's a lot of confusion on what a new type is, and the fan base, I would argue, is definitely divided on whether or not they like new types or they think new types are stupid. Or just like the in between of just I don't really care. I'm here for the robots.
Right. That's true. It's definitely polarizing, and it is a thing where you can. There's very new typey media, so you can enjoy the new type stuff if you enjoy the new type stuff, and there's stuff that's a little like more like rugged, grounded kind of ground, like troops on the ground kind of media that doesn't really engage in the space psychic stuff.
In general, though, regardless of it's the Universal Century or a spin-off, alternate universe, whatever. Some form of new type or analogy or analog to a new type
almost always shows
up. Yeah. Or like cyber new types, which are people that were genetically altered to demonstrate new type abilities.
Right. Gundam is very tropey, and this is one of the most popular.
One of the most popular tropes is new types, and like the mental instability of new types and cyber new types and stuff like that.
Right.
They also got like candy hair.
Some of them.
Yeah.
Some of them, yeah. They especially in the 80s, the characters' hairs started to get very colorful, especially the new types in particular.
Yeah, especially God.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like
I actually hadn't put that together until I just thought about it.
You can definitely. I don't even think it stops at just the Universal Century. It's kind of going off track, but if you look at 00, all the cyber new type analogs, all have like multicolored hair.
That's true.
Yeah, and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, so whether or not you're against new types or for new types, it's just a trope that will show up. So maybe just don't fight it. Don't fight it. Just let it happen.
Don't fight it.
But what is a new type?
That's tough because even the shows and the media sometimes seem to have different ideas of what a new type is. But I definitely think that generally speaking, new types pilot robot good.
Yeah, that's pretty much. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think there's no real argument against. It's like it's pretty much it. It's like if you pilot robot good, they're gonna start calling you a new type.
Yeah,
and it's kind of just it's almost a misnomer for a lot of the times because there's no way that there's so many new types that early on in the 1 year war because not all of them would have had the trauma necessarily to display new type like abilities. The reason the white base was an outlier is because they're literally used as a decoy for the rest of the Earth Federation forces while they fight on the main front. The white base is literally just running around trying to avoid getting caught. I can imagine.
It also, I mean, on some level, like new types are like a coincidence, regardless, because there's already people talking about new types before there even are new types.
Right. So in the origins,
whatever a new type is ends up fitting the glove of what people thought it could be, and they force a lot of expectations and ideas
Definitely,
on to what a new type is.
there's definitely a spectrum to like new types. Like
Definitely.
the bottom end is you're just a good pilot,
Yeah.
and then the upper echelon of like new type abilities is like straight up mind control.
Right. Well, and there's certain characters who seem like they can like will themselves to be new types. Like it seems like Char basically just decides.
Yeah,
to be
this
a
is
new type.
yeah, I guess so.
You know, and that doesn't really interfere
I think that's more
with,
of just like subtextual.
yeah. But there's some like will to power. There's like some Nietzschean stuff like, going on with Char. Whereas like Amuro in particular is like having all these psychedelic experiences, these like very like post-Vietnam kind of psychedelia kind of.
I definitely don't think that's off base like anywhere, because like new type in itself is so like integrally connected to like human consciousness and human identity, and the understanding, like human understanding is such a huge,
especially
like it's such a huge theme that shows up in Gundam constantly.
Empathy and connection.
Yeah.
And new types are always super lonely. They're very isolated and lonely kind
I
of
would say like the big overall theme of Gundam is to believe in the potential of human change.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's tough to make a theme for so many different disparate pieces of media.
That's fair.
But I do agree. that those aren't, that's not far off. But I do think that like, you know, being a new type in particular, it's got this, there's a lot of complications.
Yeah.
to it.
It's kind of, I feel like you can kind of compare it to being like a Jedi in Star Wars.
It's very similar.
It's like there's so many Jedis running around, stuff like that, and then now there's
they also hyperfixate on one another.
Hyperfixate on Jedi, and the scale at which certain Jedi have can use the Force and can't use the Force or whatever.
Right.
New types are kind of in that way, and some people, just like Gundam fans, prefer Gundam media with less new types or less analogies to new types.
Right.
There's like Star Wars fans that don't really like Jedi and would prefer stories with less Jedi. And,
right.
Yeah. That's not. I don't think that's wrong. It's like I think some of the most interesting stories you can tell are the ones that have like one new type, not like a million new types or whatever.
Yeah. Sometimes there are parts where it's just like the new types are just chasing one another, and there's like a giant war going on. It seems like none of them are actually interacting with the actual conflict. They're just hyperfixating on the other new types. But the Jedi's kind of do that in Star Wars too. Yeah. So.
I mean, I guess there's the in-universe explanation of like new types attract other new types.
Well, and they can see each other through like
they could like psychically connect to each other, and communicate in their machines.
Yeah. There's this idea that's kind of expressed in a lot of the media that new type is like a response to the infinite vastness of space, and your conscious grows and expands and fills out. To fill that void, and it bumps into other people's consciousnesses, and they start to like interact and mingle and like melt together. There's this very vivid image in the original where Lala Soon, who's a very famous early new type, she has this gold dress, and the gold dress just expands and expands and expands until it's like all of space is that giant gold dress.
And then she turns into a swan.
It's
like the craziest acid trip.
Yeah. All of this makes sense in the narrative. It's actually very
satisfying. You watch it, this will make perfect sense.
Yeah,
actually, you know what? If you at this point or at any point of this video have like decided, Gundam sounds a little interesting, maybe I should just stop the video. Go watch it.
Go watch Gundam.
Go watch it. Come back here, and then maybe you'll kind of understand what we're talking about a little more. Or if you still haven't been sold, keep watching, because I think this is the perfect time to move on to the other OVAs.
The OVAs. So anime OVAs, original video animations, are basically the straight to VHS, straight to DVD, straight to Laserdisc. A lot of them went straight to Laserdisc. Laserdisc is the premier format of old school anime.
You ever seen Blade Runner on Laserdisc?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm talking about. Or it's really funny because there's still, Laserdisc is popular in a lot of weird fandoms, because sometimes the best version of a movie is still the version that's stuck on Laserdisc. But anime had a huge presence on Laserdisc. Pioneer being a big Japanese company that created the Laserdisc. And sending people home with an anime, letting people watch anime on their home television instead of
it also got past TV censors and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
And if I recall, some historical reports say it was much more financially stable, or
that makes sense too,
for a lot of animators and stuff like that. Instead of trying to sell a product to a studio to then like put on airways, they can just sell the product directly to a consumer.
Yeah. And I think it also contributed to anime becoming as resolutely about its own style, because it kept doubling down on what was working.
Right.
Whatever was popular with viewers, they would just crank out another one that.
And a lot of like creators today got their start. Like Anno got his start in OVAs and working on OVAs and stuff like that.
The OVA era cannot be
Yes.
discounted as an important part of anime. For sure.
kind of like the indie comics boom
Yeah.
in like America.
Yeah,
I feel
totally.
like, but
Totally.
I think trying to get back on track.
Yeah. But yeah, but the early Gundam OVAs, not only did they drastically change, the anime industry, but they drastically changed the way that the Gundam was going.
Yeah,
too.
I think well, I guess we should just go and start with the first OVA I would like to talk about, the Mobile Suit Gundam, the 08th MS Team.
Mhm.
Personally, this is actually one of my favorite Gundam animes. It was a 12-episode OVA series, originally airing from 1996 to 1999. It also has a compilation film / recap movie / sort of new footage called Miller's Report
I
from
remember that.
1998. I don't recommend that at all.
Mhm.
I'm just putting that out there right now. You don't need to watch Miller's Report. If anything, Miller's Report is like a huge waste of time. It's set like in the middle of the story, so you don't actually get a full compilation, and it's kind of just more of a recap movie. And then the other product from the 08 MS team is the Battle in 3 Dimensions, which is a 9-minute OVA from 2016. I think it was packaged along with a Blu-ray anniversary
Mhm.
disc box, either of the 08 MS team, or I think it was
I think that is
one
right. I
of
think
the
it's
other
from the
OVAs.
Blu-ray.
Yeah. But
I haven't seen it though.
08th MST, it's so good. The
Really?
animation's- Yeah, the animation's solid. It's
Okay.
really good. If the worst part about it is that it's only 9 minutes.
Oh yeah, that's pretty brief.
Yeah, and I think there is an opening and outro to it too.
So it's like 5 minutes?
It's like 5-7 minutes.
Yeah.
But the 08th MS team, I commonly refer to as Gundam in Vietnam.
Mhm.
It's the big ground conflict. I feel like,
Right. Takes place in Southeastern
Mhm.
Asia for the most part.
like you said, this is like was an entry point for a lot of people
Yeah.
getting into Gundam, especially in the 90s and stuff like that.
Yeah, this is one of the things that was on Toonami.
hmm It wasn't the first.
No.
It was not the first.
No,
but
Wing was first, and then I think later, like the OVAs mostly popped
was it
up though,
Wing,
as
G,
yeah.
08th MS team,
War in a Pocket.
then Stardust,
Stardust
Memories.
Memories. I think
And
those
then
are the main ones I saw.
Seed. Think
Did
Seed.
they use some Seed?
I think
Wow.
Seed aired actually too.
Okay.
I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves
Yeah,
though.
yeah.
But 08th MS team, I think this is a perfect entry point for anyone who's like curious and doesn't really want to. Is more of a fan of 90s animation, especially.
Yeah, totally.
This anime has so much personality.
Yeah, it's really good.
and it's
I love it. I'm a huge fan.
this is the one that I think usually recommend to people that are like, oh, how should I get into the Universal Century? And I just go, just watch 08th MS team, see how you like it. From there, go to 079.
Yeah.
It's the same, set in the same period of time. It's just set in the 1-year war. It's just a different part of the war. Kind of like have you seen Band of Brothers?
Yeah, it's got that element to it.
Yeah, so it's like Band of Brothers is one thing, but then
Yeah.
you have the Pacific.
Yeah.
Right. So like if Band of Brothers is 0079, then Pacific is the 08th MS team.
The MS team is really good. I mean, it's really, really good. And it's like hard to. I mean, the action is amazing,
Phenomenal.
Yeah, it's like the choreography of it all and the way that it like really invests in the technology. I mean, there's just certain shots like when they have these long range kind of like artillery guns.
Yeah.
That they're like sitting nestled in the
I
sand.
love the
like,
backpacks.
the backpacks are great.
The Easy 8 is like
There's-
one of my favorite mobile suits.
And there's actually a
Pretty
bunch
fun.
of Gundams in this one. It's like one of the first ones to have a bunch of Gundams in UC,
Right.
even though they are kind of
Not really
they're
Gundams.
not really Gundams. Yeah,
They're like ground types.
Yeah.
Who cares? It's cool.
They're
They look
awesome.
cool.
I love them. I love it, and it's a great story. And the characters in it are just like memorable and lovable. And yeah, I'd say it's a high point of anime, not just Gundam. It's a really, really good show.
So another OVA also set during the 1-year war.
Mm-hmm.
Mobile Suit Gundam Thunderbolt.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's actually an adaptation of a seinen manga by the same name that is still currently running to this day.
Yeah, I saw on newsstands in Japan very recently. New chapters were coming.
Yeah. I think it's because the author has some health complications that caused the
Slow
manga
down?
to essentially slow down production
Yeah.
almost indefinitely at some point.
Oh,
But
wow.
in the more recent period of time, it's like been picking back up.
Bring it back up.
But as for its original net animation this time, so it's an ONA that was originally released from 2015 to 2016.
Thunderbolt wasn't an OVA; it was an ONA.
Yes, it was an ONA.
Wow.
Meaning you had to watch it on a website somewhere.
Yeah, I think I watched it for the first time on Gundam Info, right? Or no?
Is it?
That's where I think I saw it for the first
I
time.
wouldn't be surprised. I would also not be surprised if like it originally aired at like a Japanese convention or whatever, or you had to like buy into the stream, get a stream ticket or something like that.
But Thunderbolt is fantastic. Thunderbolt's also very modern.
Yes, Thunderbolt. It's there's 2 compilation films that I would say you should just watch that instead of the ONA. December Sky released in 2016, and then Bandit Flower released in 2017. These are essentially just compilations of the ONA episodes. The music is phenomenal. It's done by the Seatbelts, which is Yoko Kanno's band. Which if anyone who knows Yoko Kanno's work,
yeah, she's the goat.
She's the goat.
She's the goat.
Just like hands down.
Yeah, she's the goat for sure.
Thunderbolt's
excellent.
Yeah, Thunderbolt does get a bad rap. I feel like for being like the edgy or the edgelord Gundam anime.
It is edgy. It's definitely really dark. It's like exceptionally dark, even for Gundam. And Gundam gets pretty dark.
Yeah. I would argue this is like there's definitely some body horror elements to it and stuff like that.
Totally.
And
but it like deals with them in a very interesting kind of way. I mean, some of the main characters are amputees, and it deals with them in a very interesting.
Well, the entire Xeon enemy fleet in this or enemy, I don't know, regiment.
Yeah, is made up of amputees.
Crew is the Living Dead division. They're all amputees, and this is actually the earliest, I think, point if you like include it into the timeline. Or I guess this is a good tangent for us to talk about the canonicity of Thunderbolt. So depending on the source,
some people don't
consider Thunderbolt canon to the 1 Year War Universal Century timeline. Some people say that it's a concurrently or parallel running timeline to the original Universal Century. I say, who cares?
It's very fun, and so it makes you feel like who cares when you're watching it. You don't care.
Yeah, honestly.
But I will say that it takes the revisionist technology because they'll always like make a new episode that takes place at a different point in the timeline, and they'll give somebody some incredible piece of technology.
Right.
And this takes that trope and like takes it to 11. People have robots that don't do anything.
Like insanely crazy things.
Yeah, don't do anything like the robots did in the other stories around the same time period.
Which brings me to my original point, which is this is I think the earliest point if you include it into the timeline we see psycho frame technology used in mobile suits or Psycommu technology or whatever with Daryl Lorenz, who is essentially a test subject for the Psycho Zaku mobile suit, which is absolutely crazy. It's so cool. I think the full armor Gundam is insane too. That thing looks so cool.
Everything in there is cool.
Everything is cool.
I think the Psycho Zaku is like legit one of the coolest designs I've ever made, but it is a very alternative, revisionist kind of robot for sure.
I think if you prefer modern animation, like post 2012 animation, let's just say.
Sure.
And you like I want to is it ultra violence in this case?
It's pretty dark.
It's kind of nearing that like category of ultra violence almost. Then I think this is like
this is the jump-in point.
Jump-in point for you. Yeah. This will sell you on like the 1 Year War and stuff like that.
Yeah, totally. And I know there are a lot of people out there. I try to sell some of my. I have friends that go to Anime Expo with, and I can't convince them to watch anything older than like 10 years old. Right. So if
it really needs to be modern animation,
this is this place.
Thunderbolt.
This is the spot.
I will say the big caveat is it's not done.
Yeah, true.
It's not done.
So you're buying yourself into something
that is like has not been finished yet.
But it's definitely it feels rewarding.
It's coming. I believe it's coming close to an end in the manga. Maybe not. But
it's also doesn't it kind of feel unlikely we're going to get more anime at this point?
Maybe not. They said I think I read somewhere way back
there could be more.
There's either 2 more in like the pipeline.
They're just promising us so much.
They're just promising so much at this point, but it doesn't matter. We'll just.
There's
other ones that you can also jump into, which brings me into the next one. I think one of your favorites, 0080, War in the Pocket, released in 1989, which was a 6-episode OVA made for the 10th anniversary of the franchise.
Right.
This is considered like I think by a majority of people, even like non-Gundam fans, is like either one of the best OVAs ever made or one of the best Gundam OVAs ever made.
I consider it one of the greatest OVAs of all time. Also, just legitimately one of the greatest anime properties of all time, and it is so resolutely Gundam. But it's like one of the first departures from Yoshiyuki Tomino's original plans, and Hiroyuki Yamaga, who wrote it. He also directed a really amazing movie, the Royal Space Force Wings of Oniami's, another incredible anime movie. But I think that what he does with it is just a beautiful thing, and it's a beautiful story. It's incredible. It's exciting. It's awesome. It's badass.
I think if you're looking for a self-contained Gundam story that doesn't necessarily you need like a whole lot of information going on or preface a lot of information going into it. Like War in the Pocket is perfect. It's like the perfect concise thesis of what Gundam is, and you get a little bit of everything. There is a mention of new types because the Alex is made for Amuro and it's made for a new type pilot. There's a little bit of romance going on with Chris McKenzie and Bernie.
Yeah.
You get the whole war is bad thing through Bernie and Alphonse's relationship. Yeah.
War bad.
War bad.
War definitely very
bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's 6 episodes. It's so short.
It's so brief and it's so delightful. I mean, it's
so good.
Yeah.
It's so very good.
Yeah, it's really, really, really good.
I don't think there's like it's really hard to just say its praises without just saying go watch
without
it.
explaining everything about it.
Yeah.
So. But I will say that it's, to me, especially because Gundam can teeter on the line and the edge of telling you that war is bad while titillating you with the thoughts and exciting experiences and adventure.
Like, don't you want to pilot a robot?
Yeah, exactly. This project
it tackles it head on.
Tackles that head on.
Yeah.
Like the childlike and childish nature of obsessing with war and conflict,
and like the glorification of conflict. And,
yes.
Yeah.
It deals with it in a really just deep, thoughtful, profound way. And the music's fantastic. I mean, the designs are great. To me, my favorite designs in all of Gundam, especially outside of the original stuff, outside the, there are things within the original I think that are just, are iconic beyond iconic, but just some of my favorite robots ever for sure. I love War in a Pocket. I think War in a Pocket is 10 out of 10.
Definitely.
My two suggestions that I have used in the past to get people into this stuff have been War in a Pocket and 8th MS Team.
Definitely both. It's very solid, very easy jumping in points.
Yeah, totally. And especially they're both brief, which is actually really nice.
8th MS Team more in the sense for if you want to get into the 1 Year War lore, then go there. War in the Pocket if you just want to get what Gundam kind of is thematically.
Yeah, thematic, philosophical.
Yeah.
Gundam. Yeah.
Definitely just start with War in the Pocket if you need to. These are perfectly good jumping off points, which leads me to the next OVA, which I think you're also a very big fan of, and I am as well. 0083 Stardust Memory.
Stardust Memories.
Released in 1991. It's a 13-episode OVA series with a compilation film called The Blitz of Xeon, released in 1992, and a 3-minute OVA called The Mayfly of Space, also released in 1992. The Mayfly of Space is set roughly between, I think, episodes 6 and 7. It's not a necessary watch for you to understand the story at all. You don't miss anything if you miss that. And Blitz of Xeon, the last Blitz of Xeon, the compilation film, it's okay. It's just a compilation film. There's nothing really to write home about. The OVA series, though, this thing's gas.
I really like it. I do. I also think that it's not narratively as strong as the two we just explored. When we were talking about 8th MS Team, we were talking about War in a Pocket. Those have more exciting stories, in my opinion. But this is the best animated Gundam.
Oh yeah, the hybridization of early 3D and early digital animation, I feel really blends together seamlessly with the 2D animation and stuff like that.
I think it's the high watermark of animation within the Gundam universe. And any of the Gundam universes, really. Yeah.
And it's another one of those stories that kind of ties into the 1 Year War. It may be a better watch with the context of what happened during the 1 Year War or during what happened in 0079 to get what's happening in Stardust Memory, but you don't necessarily need that. Stardust Memory is coined as the Top Gun Gundam anime, which I think
the setup is definitely like that.
Yeah, it's definitely like that, and aesthetically too, it kind of appeals to that kind of.
The music has a similar level of 80s 90s kind of cheese to it too. That honestly is just awesome.
I think isn't the song in the opening? There's a soaring
exactly. But the animation's amazing, and it does have some it's really funny. It's a super polarizing show because the characters are kind of all over the place. Some of them are so strong.
I am not a fan of the main character of Stardust Memory.
He's maybe one of the
most unlikable characters in my opinion. For Eva fans out there, Ko Araki is worse than Shinji. In every sense, because Shinji will get in the robot and do the stuff. Ko, this is his job. He already signed up for it. Shinji
still doesn't want to get in the robot.
Right.
He's Ko Araki is a
he does have an arc, but it's almost he doesn't get to complete it by the end. I mean, we can go in more detail if we ever do an episode just talking about Stardust Memory, which I think
there's so many things to
just go into.
So many things to say about it. And I'm really a big fan of. I actually love Gato, one of the best villains Big fan
But
of Gacha.
just like as I said again, like with 08th MS Team, if you are a huge fan of 90s animation and 90s anime, like Stardust Memory might be just like the perfect jumping point for you as well. It's
if animation quality matters to you above all else, that's where I suggest you jump in. But I wouldn't suggest you jump in for any other reason. Just because I do think it's a little dependent on 0079 and Zeta for what's exciting about what's going on in the background of it.
I don't disagree with that. And if anything, I would say, definitely just if you're a fan of 90s animation.
Yeah, the animation's it's so good. It's
for any other recommendation, maybe start 08th MS Team so you can get more invested into like the whole lore or the narrative. The stakes that go on, so that way when you get to 0083, there is slightly more of a payoff there.
I will say that the earlier stuff we mentioned kind of has a good guy, bad guy balance that's very black and white. And as you start getting into the OVAs, things start getting gray.
Definitely, I think Stardust Memory and War in the Pocket blur the lines like the heaviest.
Between good guy and bad guy.
Right.
And those themes do carry on, I think, into later projects. But those in particular are very interested in making you wonder, wait, who's the good guy here? Who's the bad guy here? It's very exciting.
Here's a hint. There's no good
guys.
There's no good guys.
No good guys. Just hamburger.
Oh my god. But you did mention Zeta Gundam,
which we should probably get into.
Brings me to the next point, which is Mobile Suit Zeta Gundam, 1985. This is my favorite Gundam anime, just hands down.
Within the core of the fandom, there's a lot of people with that opinion.
I don't think this is like a strange opinion or something that I think I'm in a minority of.
It's the Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, it's the Empire Strikes Back, or like the Gundam franchise. But I do not recommend starting here at all.
No, you can't. Can't do that.
And definitely do not watch the Zeta films, Heir to the Stars. Or a new translation. I believe that's what they're called. A new translation, 1, 2, and 3. Heir to the Stars, Lovers, and Love is the Pulse of the Stars. I am not a fan of these movies, these compilation, readaptation. I don't know really what to call them. They add new animation, like modern animation. And they splice it in together with old animation. And sometimes they'll actually upgrade the old animation. It just makes me think, it's like, one, why didn't you just either upgrade all of the older animation?
Why didn't you just redo all of it?
Or just redo all of it in modern animation. Like, pick a lane. Pick a lane. And the worst part about it is
also Zeta's animation isn't that bad to begin with.
Yeah, Zeta's animation is not bad
because 80s animation is a big leap ahead of 70s animation. And some people will argue that
like if you're a fan of Dragon Ball Z, you'll be fine watching Zeta Gundam. Like, but another point I'd say, don't watch the Zeta movies, is they do change the canon, and then this is like another.
That's true.
Like another. Oh, is it a canon to the UC, or is it another branching UC timeline type deal? It's like, just don't watch the Zeta movies. Just if you're gonna watch Zeta, watch the anime.
This does happen though. This happens not all the time, but it happens every once in a while where you don't really know what the canon ending of something is. Is the book the canon ending, or is the show the canon ending? Is the manga the canon ending? Sometimes they have like 3 different endings.
Yeah. Here's a heads up. If you're questioning canon and Gundam, just don't worry about it. Don't think about it too hard.
Pick your favorite.
Right.
That one's the real one.
But then there's also, Double Zeta, released from 1986 to 1987, 47 episodes. I like Double Zeta. I love Zeta. We have our difference of opinions over Double Zeta, I feel. I think both of them are terrible starting points if you're dipping your toes or trying to get into Gundam, especially the Universal Century.
Right.
This and the next topic, Mobile Suit Gundam Char's Counterattack from 1988. Zeta, Double Zeta, and CCA, these are all payoffs to setups from 0079.
Right.
And then, I guess to an extent, the OVAs that were introduced to all that stuff.
Even the OVAs are still really building rather than payoffs. Yeah. And these other shows, the 3 that we're talking about, are kind of payoffs, and they don't really work without their build. Without the things that are simmering under the one for them. But yeah, I don't love Double Zeta. I love the music. I like some of the designs. There's some cool robots. There's a bunch of wasted characters. I can't even, honestly, even if you're someone who's already watched 0079 and watched Zeta, I might even implore you, because I've had friends quit the Gundam canon and like have to take a year
break or something like that, exactly, because of Double Zeta.
Because Double Zeta is
even in the historical context of like Zeta and then Double Zeta's release, it's not even like there was like a huge gap in time. It was like, oh, 1 week was Zeta, the next week was Double Zeta, and the tonal whiplash is just absolutely insane.
Yeah.
I still like it.
There's good things about it.
It's still hard to recommend.
My favorite opening.
Like how much I do like it and how invested I am into the franchise as a whole. It's
problem
still a
is
hard
that,
recommendation.
the problem though is that they look like a trilogy.
Yeah.
You know, 0079, Zeta, and Double Zeta. From the outside looking in, it looks like a trilogy, and that's certainly not how the trilogy works. There is a trilogy, and Double Zeta is like a 0.5 in that trilogy rather than like number 3.
I have heard
CCA is
read opinions similar to that, where people say if you're gonna get into the Universal Century, just watch 0079, Zeta, and then go to CCA.
CCA, yeah.
Which I think is like, it's not bad.
Mm-hmm.
Like there are worse ways to go about it.
I feel like coming back to Double Zeta, if you feel so inclined, is my suggestion over going straight into Double Zeta from Zeta.
I will admit, the first time I watched Double Zeta, I wasn't too big a fan. I still finished it, but upon second watch and like repeat watches, like it's definitely like kind of wormed its way into a special place in my heart.
It has a certain sense of personality. It has a certain sense of whimsy. There are fun hijinks and adventures along the way, but to me, it is way too much.
It's kind of, if you're down for the meme, then you'll probably like Double Zeta.
Yeah.
But if you're not, then it's maybe not for you.
Yeah. Especially if you like Zeta. That's the real big problem. Is that Zeta is so totally different.
God, Zeta is so good. Zeta is so good, and then Double Zeta says, "Let's just do a 180 real quick, take 10 steps back." And then I'll meet you on the other side.
It's kind of interesting too, because isn't Anime Janai one of the Double Zeta openings?
Yes, that's the first Double Zeta opening.
So
this isn't an anime.
Yeah. So Anime Janai means this is not an anime. So the entire opening song is like, this is an anime, this is real. And then the show is very silly and it's childlike.
Yeah.
And it's not as gritty as the show.
If anything, I'd say it's like peak 80s anime. It's like the intersection of toys and anime.
yeah. But it also feels, I mean, when Char's Counterattack got greenlit, you can like basically see the week that it got greenlit, because the plot of Double Zeta changes drastically out of nowhere halfway through the show. So I mean, it's just it's a show that could, as it has for Ryan, grow on you. But if you're looking at like all these, like, what do I watch? How do I get there? Like,
definitely not a starting point.
Not a starting point.
Which also, I'm glad you mentioned CCA again. Do not start as Char's Counterattack. What are you doing?
It won't make sense. It won't be fun.
It's not going to make sense. You're probably not going to enjoy it. Like visually, it'll probably look cool and it'll be visually stimulating and stuff like that. But you have no stakes. You have no emotional or investment, or personal context for like whatever is going on. Mm-hmm. So don't really start here.
But it
is like one of the best Gundam movies, or just Gundam products in general.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's awesome. It also the funny thing is now that they're finally doing the Hathaway stuff, there's actually some setup in that one.
Yeah, from CCA into other stuff.
Yeah, which is really cool.
Which is pretty.
Which is really cool.
Which leads us into the next point. Mobile Gundam, or MSG Twilight Axis, released in 2017. It was a 6-episode ONA and a direct sequel to CCA, set 3 years after the events of the Axis event. Which is like the big thing in Char's Counterattack.
Yeah.
I remember it was not well liked when it was initially released, because essentially it's 6 episodes that are each 5 to 6 minutes roughly, with I think an opening and an ending, when they could have just released it as 1 episode or whatever.
Right.
It's just definitely one of those things where they tried to stretch it out, and I think it damaged the product overall, or it damaged the narrative or the story overall.
When they're only releasing 5 minutes a week or something like that?
Yeah, something like that. It's kind of ridiculous, right?
I'm not sure why they do that,
but if you watch it as a whole, I'd say it's pretty good, especially if you have like the context of CCA, and there's the it's kind of more of a low stakes conflict too. So it's not really, anything huge going on, and it's self-contained. It's only 1 episode. It's only like 30 minutes when you really consider it. But other than that, not a good starting point for Gundam at all.
Who's in it?
No one that really matters.
Really? It has no returning characters?
Well, technically, I guess Char returns. I don't want to get too much into spoiler territory, but it's a Neo-Zeon remnant force trying to get to the Sazabi to salvage it, essentially, 3 years after.
Okay.
And the conflict is with a paramilitary group that is also salvaging whatever remnants they can find from the Axis. Yeah, exactly.
Axis shock.
Yeah. And the Gundam Tristan is actually made from salvaged parts from the Axis event.
Okay.
Yeah, that they made and they just cobbled together a Gundam.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's like, it's actually really cool. It's a really cool, like, you know, setup and narrative and stuff like that. It's just, without CCA, you don't really have a lot of investment going into it.
Mm-hmm.
And
the Axis shock, by the way, is like a life-changing.
Yeah,
event.
it's a big deal.
Yeah, it's a big crazy thing that happens. And it's one of those things that you're trying to build through all of these different projects and properties. And it's a very cool event. And so this sounds like this is something that kind of capitalizes in the intrigue of that event.
But to start at Twilight Access, probably not.
Probably not.
Which leads us to the next one in the timeline of the Universal Century, which is Mobile Suit Gundam Unicorn, released in 2010. It's another novel adaptation, I believe. This time
a series of novels, they were coming
not
out.
by Tomino, but
Tomino didn't write these.
Harutoshi Fukui.
Okay.
From 2007 to 2009. And then it was released as 7 OVA episodes from 2010 to 2014. And then, like with the Origins movie, it was kind of broken down into an anime. 22 episode anime in 2016. Unicorn is very good. I really like Unicorn. Like, I like the novel and I like the anime or the OVAs. Big problem though, it's one of those like payoff for being invested into the Universal Century or the 1 Year War lore and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's especially got a lot of callbacks. Got a lot of callbacks. I think that it does have 2 really good things going for it, for maybe 3 for people who enjoy recent stuff.
Yep.
Or are looking for recently animated stuff.
Yeah, modern animation.
And then the animation is quite good. The designs are really, really good.
Yeah.
Music's really, really good.
I love the Shinanju.
Yeah.
I love the Banshee. I love the Unicorn. The Delta Kai is so cool. The Kshatriya is one of my favorite mobile suits.
Yeah, I love the Kshatriya. What's that giant the giant red thing?
Oh, that's the
Shambhala?
Shambhala Shinanju or something like that?
That thing rules.
Or is it the Shambhala or is Yeah, it is that, like the mobile armor, right?
Yeah.
I thought you were talking about the one that the Shinanju kind of docks into, which is I think that's
Neo Zeon.
Yeah.
Neo Zeon also rules.
Like that thing is just so cool. It's such a cool callback.
Well, also if you like the model kits, I think Neo Zeon is still the biggest.
Oh yeah, it's still the biggest kit.
So if you're really into the Gunpla, this is probably a good place for you to jump in.
Neo Zeong.
Yeah.
NEO space ZEONG. Zeong.
The Neo Zeong's dope.
So cool.
It's very lit. But I will say that I'm not completely sold on like the quality of the storytelling.
It's definitely a recycle of plots from the original 0079, and if you are
it's
familiar
a pacing it doesn't really
with
do it
it,
for me.
You can definitely tell. And I agree, like the pacing is kind of weird sometimes. I think a bigger issue is it's so contingent on you having some sense of the like space politics.
True.
From
and there's also
0079.
some very confusing allegiances with
right
that as
if
well.
you weren't already like aware of what the lines in the sand were, or the factionist nature of post Principality of Zeon falling apart into like the Neo Zeon remnant forces and stuff like that.
But even like within the teams, there are like micro teams,
right,
who don't even necessarily
agree with each other. Yeah. And like working against each other and stuff like
Right.
that. I mean, it's a common trope that shows up throughout the Gundam franchise as a whole, especially in the Universal Century. I think Zeta has Titans, which is a subgroup within the Earth Federation that was created to hunt down Zeon remnants.
Right.
And then Zeon itself, breaks up into smaller factions, Neo Zeon, Axis Zeon, and stuff like that. Then you have
the AUG.
Yeah, AUG, Anti-Earth Union Group, which also breaks up into small factions because they can't work together, essentially.
Yeah, it does happen a lot, but I will say that Unicorn, I think, approaches some of the most confusing.
Because like in Unicorn, you have Neo Zeon, and then you have the Sleeves, and then you have Londo Bell, I believe.
And the Garcenaries.
And the Garcenaries, and then you have the Earth Federation as well.
And they're building a lot of interesting lore for the Universal Century within it. And so I also think that the payoff's not. So there's just the MacGuffin of Unicorn is this thing called Laplace's box, and I'm not going to tell you what's in the box, but I will tell you it's not that cool.
I would very much disagree. Laplace's box is actually very, very, very cool, and it's actually super integral to
That's how they set it up, but then it just doesn't feel that way. I don't know.
Excuse me.
It doesn't land.
It's actually very integral to
the entire Universal
Century lore.
Yeah, no, totally.
But as a starting point into Unicorn, I feel like a lot of people that started with Unicorn you know, they either liked it or hated it, and the people that liked it stuck with Gundam, but the people that hated it just dropped Gundam as a
That's
whole.
true.
I would say like the confusing nature at which Unicorn tells its story, just, you know, kind of just expository, like we are the blah 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 blah. We believe in this is the
Right.
it's like you should join us, because it can get confusing and very wordy, and people can get lost very easily. And without the context of everything else going into it, definitely the payoff is a lot less.
Well, and the other thing that it does is a lot of times it pits friends against one another.
Right.
Right. So like Riddy
And motivations are. I'm glad you mentioned Riddy, because
Right.
his motivation is so confusing
confusing.
sometimes.
It's really confusing. But he's also Benager and Riddy are two of the main characters, but they're also very good friends. But
Yeah.
they're also fighting,
Yeah.
and they're also friends, and they're also fighting.
And then there's Marita, who's also friends,
And
but
also
also fighting, but also friends,
Yes.
but also fighting.
And that all of that in itself is just I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
there's really good things about it, but I'm definitely not going to try and sell you on it as hard as I have with some of
Right.
the things before it.
The next one after that is also Gundam Narrative, released in 2018.
yeah.
NT.
Uh-huh.
This is also another novel adaptation of Phoenix Hunting
Yeah.
from 2015. It's definitely one of the more looser adaptations, I would say. I think
Okay.
the other novel or light novel adaptations are slightly more in line with what was essentially being told beforehand. But I mean, I like Narrative. I like Narrative a lot.
I like Narrative too. Of course, I would never suggest anyone start here.
Yeah.
But I will say that Narrative does, at least compared to Unicorn, the story is a lot easier to follow. I don't think the character designs are as good though. And the robot designs are all reused.
Yeah, pretty much.
So whereas Unicorn is maybe better at like the physical, the auditory kind of experience, Narrative has a better story, which I guess it should, considering it's called Narrative.
Yeah, it's also much more concise.
Yeah, way more concise.
Yeah.
Because it's just a movie.
Right. But going back to the point where you said, where it's like as a recommendation, as a starting point, along with Unicorns, like don't start here.
Yeah.
These are probably like some of the worst places, along with like Zeta and Double
Especially
Zeta.
within UC.
Like especially within UC. These are like some of the worst places that you can start
Yeah.
if you've never watched the Gundam anime, or you're like very curious in what Gundam is about. Don't start here.
Yeah, definitely don't.
These are
These are
shows that you approach with the expectation of forehand knowledge.
Right.
Which I'm not saying you need a degree in Gundam college to understand what's going on in the franchise, but it helps.
Yeah. But I also will say that if you watch some of the ones I've suggested you watch, you'll end up with one by the time you're done.
No, definitely.
They're that good.
Yeah. Next one after that is Mobile Suit Gundam Hathaway's Flash.
Oh, I love Hathaway's Flash.
2021.
Can't start with it, but I love
Yeah, definitely can't start with it. This one is a more of a direct sequel to CCA.
it. Yeah.
And it's an adaptation of a 3-volume light novel originally released from 1989 to 1990.
Which were written by Tomino.
Yes, were written by Tomino, and the light novel itself is actually a direct sequel to Bella-Chica's Children, which is the second light novel adaptation of CCA.
Of CCA, yeah.
Yeah, CCA has a lot of adaptations, both
Yeah.
in novelization
But when we were
form
talking
and
about
manga
things
form.
with different endings,
Yeah, this is
CCA
what we
just,
mean.
like,
But
the
Hathaway's
canon gets
Flash,
real mixed up. Because that's also like one thing that people who are fans of Hathaway's Flash are all debating amongst themselves is like, which of these universes does it exist in? We don't know. We're gonna have to find out.
It's this weird hodgepodge anime universe or whatever.
Who knows?
Who knows?
I think that we're gonna have an idea of exactly how things went down by the time it's done.
Yeah, definitely.
But we don't know yet because it's only the first one has come out. And how many are planned?
3.
3.
Yeah.
Well, it rules. It's amazing.
No,
It's so
Hathaway.
good.
If you read the light novel, fantastic. It's
Yeah.
really, really good.
Yeah.
If you're watching the movies, can you start here? What would you say?
I don't know. That's a good question.
I feel like
no, don't just. But you could because
You
it's
could.
good enough. But don't because I think that it makes too many cool, interesting points that are directly
linked
relevant
to
to CCA.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. I think that's fair.
Yeah, but it is really, really good.
It's also beautifully
it's
animated.
beautiful. The atmosphere is incredible.
So good.
Hathaway's Flash does this thing where it kind of turns the mobile suits and the robots back into like kaijus.
Yes,
It reminds you
oh
exactly.
my God,
reminds
I
you of
love
how
that. I know
reminds you
exactly
how-
what scene you're talking about.
Reminds you of how dangerous they are.
I think I've seen it like reposted a million times on social media too, because
Yeah.
it's such a good scene and concept. It really gives you a sense of scale for how huge these things are. These
Yeah.
are weapons of like mass destruction.
Yeah.
But yeah, Starting
terrifying, exhilarating, but you can't start here.
Starting here, no, I don't think so.
Nope.
Especially because, like as you said, there's so many direct links back to CCA.
Yeah, of course.
The main character being Hathaway Noah is the son of Bright Noah, a character going all the way back to the original 0079. That's Lieutenant Bright.
Right.
Also, Hathaway has PTSD directly from the events of Char's counterattack.
CCA,
Yeah, that and he's haunted by a ghost of someone.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah. Yeah, he's got a new type ghost.
Yeah,
living in his head. But it's so good. It's so good.
And if you have watched CCA, what are you doing if you haven't watched this movie?
Yeah, go get on it. And I'm sure there are people, you know what I mean, who have like fallen behind in the canon and haven't kept up. And I really do. The best thing about it too is it's so easy to watch. I watched it. What was that? Don't say that. It's not on blank. Okay. Well, anyways, it's very easy to watch. It's on a major streaming platform, and it's I watched it like 4 times the week.
Oh yeah, no, me too.
Yeah,
I couldn't stop watching.
Yeah, I just like kept loading it up.
Also, it was like the newest piece of Gundam to come out in like I think a fair amount of time.
Yeah,
so,
especially in UC.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which that kind of. I think that's it for like what is considered the early UC continuity.
Right.
After that, we enter what is known as late UC.
Right. They're basically they're carving new ground.
Yeah, essentially.
Right now. Yeah.
And we're still getting additions in late UC and early UC and stuff like that. But the first part of late UC would be F91, released in 1991, and this is another one of those. Probably don't start here. This in general is a very infamous. Like anime movie just in general, I feel like.
Right. I mean, it's very famously Tomino. The creator of Gundam, Yoshiyuki Tomino. I think he has a lot of lovers, a lot of haters.
Yeah.
People who are for him, people who are detractors of him, and I would say this is amongst his most Tomino, which is usually not a compliment, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately, it was also. I think the production story is very infamous too.
Yeah.
And how essentially it went from a full 50-episode anime and then got cut down to one feature-length film. So it's a compilation film for an anime that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And there's so many cool things in there too.
Yeah, really.
There's so many like interesting ideas that are presented and explorations, but
Tomino's never short on interesting challenging ideas.
But
the storytelling can be
proper
really
explorations of it aren't necessarily, I would say, his strongest suit.
Well, and a lot of times you can end up, and maybe this is just maybe other people have this problem. I find that in Tomino's projects, oftentimes you just find characters that are just shouting at one another.
Yeah.
And F91 is just people
shouting at each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think there's just 2 minutes straight of just cut from one cockpit with a bunch of speed lines, cut to another cockpit with a bunch of speed lines, just shout here, shout there. It's like, why are you fighting? Oh, I gotta fight for my family. Oh, I'm fighting for my family too, blah, blah, blah.
Well, and when like the city's being destroyed, there's so much chaos and like, well, use the kids as shields. And it's just like,
what?
Yeah, it's just like, it's just absurdity. It is kind of funny, but it's also something that I think is more enjoyable if you've.
The crazy thing is like
it goes back to the memes you were talking about.
It's like if you're in it for the memes, then maybe you'll enjoy it. But if you're not, probably not the best for you. Definitely not a good starting point.
It's not even
definitely not a starting point.
No. It's also not relevant to really anything else.
Yeah,
it lives kind of in a vacuum.
Unless you're like a manga fan. That's really it, because the only things that have really spawned off from F91 that are worth investing in are
mangas.
Yeah, the manga, like the Crossbones manga. That's really it.
Yeah.
Other than that, F91 isn't really relevant to the story at all, except for we made mobile suits smaller. Cool. And we have beam shields now. Cool.
Yeah.
Like in atmosphere flight.
Something they probably secretly have in Thunderbolt already.
Yeah. Like we have in-atmospheric flight with non-transformable mobile suits. Okay.
Yeah.
It's not really. It took you that long to improve the technology.
Yeah. It's one of those things that's just like a funny production history that resulted in something really interesting. And Tomino
Right.
was always struggling with his bosses, with his superiors,
Mhm.
with how much they're trying to merchandise his stories, and sometimes he has a reputation for sabotaging an entire story
Yes,
just because
which
they're trying to force him to integrate more
brings
toys,
me to
basically.
my next point,
Yeah.
which is Mobile Suit Victory Gundam from
Yeah.
1993. This is another Tomino anime.
Mhm.
Tomino directed. I think this was the last one he directed until coming back for Reconquista and G.
Yeah, G-Reco.
This is a 51 episode anime released from 1993 to 1994. I like Victory Gundam a lot.
I think Victory Gundam is cool, but also Victory Gundam is the one that's
Yeah.
really infamous.
Yeah, Tomino
They started
hates
calling
it.
him Kill 'Em All Tomino.
Yeah, because of
his
Victory
game.
Gundam.
Yeah.
Tomino hates Victory Gundam.
Yeah.
Victory Gundam for a long time was considered like the darkest Gundam series.
Yeah.
I think it's just because it has that quirky 90 animation style, and then it just had the subject matter that is
Yeah.
essentially portrayed.
Yeah.
And
And he has a tendency to, especially in his non-Gundam media, he has a tendency to just like wipe off
out
yeah,
all
just
of
wipe
them.
off all his characters.
If anyone is familiar with the story of Space Runaway Ideon, like perfect example.
Yeah. But in this one, it takes place. The main character is so young too.
Yes,
he
he is like one of the
Gundam
youngest Gundam pilots or
Right.
something like that.
And then all the characters just die. So
Yeah, I think at that point, when Victory Gundam was released, that Usopp was
the youngest.
the youngest.
Yeah.
Which is just just kind of goes back into the whole child soldier aspect of the Gundam franchise.
It's well tread, well worn,
well
path.
tread and
Yeah.
well worn ground.
Yeah.
But yeah, starting with Victory Gundam though,
Never.
I can't say it's a good idea. to start
Actually,
at
I don't know.
Victory.
I will say there's one type of anime fan who I think could start with
Victory
and it's people who are fans of really retro, like,
90s,
yeah,
like early 90s,
really
anime.
retro stuff that's absurd. If you want absurd retro anime, this is like this.
If you like shock, like if you just like sheer shock value, just go ahead and watch Victory Gundam.
Yeah, but Ideon does that even better.
But
maybe.
Ideon does that better.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But the exact person who would like Ideon would also like
Victory Gundam. Yeah. But me personally, if you're trying to get into the Gundam franchise, maybe not start with Victory. This might actually turn you off to the rest of the shows, but
It's not my suggestion.
It's not my suggestion either. After Victory is, I believe, the last entry into the Universal Century timeline. G Savior.
Yeah.
From 1999. We don't talk about G Savior.
I'm down to talk about G Savior. I've watched G Savior twice. I have no idea what happens in G Savior. G Savior is so boring that I haven't been able to maintain full concentration through it 2 times. But it's a live-action Canadian sci-fi feature film from the 90s that takes place in the very, very, very far future of the stories.
I'm not talking about G Savior.
All right, move on.
So moving on to Mobile Suit Gundam Reconquista in G from 2014. This is another Tomino venture. I think this is the last one Tomino actually directed.
Yeah.
It's in the Universal Century technically, but it takes so far flung into the future of the Universal Century, the calendar has changed again, and it's called the Reguild Century. And the Reguild Century has experienced over 1,000 years of peace, essentially, from after the end of the Universal Century. And so it's Reguild, or like RC 1014, and Reconquista in G was, when the anime first aired, I don't think it had a very good reception. If I recall, I think it was very lukewarm, especially since
There's some really interesting things about it.
Yeah,
Like I remember people were because it doesn't really have an opening, because all of the footage from the opening is from the show.
right.
So that was already interesting, because the opening of an anime and the ending of an anime, there's a whole thing within the anime fandom where like those are part of what people really enjoy about it.
Yeah.
So when a show just uses like
Recycled footage.
from inside a show, people are like, that's a little bit of a red
Weird.
flag in the
Okay.
anime fandom. But I will say that there was a lot of anticipation to see what a Tomino, because also there's this idea too that like,
Tomino's like the god of Gundam.
but also he's healthy now. He's not depressed anymore. He's gonna be good, right? And so there's always this idea of like, what's Tomino gonna do next? And Tomino is by himself as a character, as a person, has been so incredibly influential to the history of anime. It's hard to overstate his legacy and his influence. But I will say that G-Reco is not that much to write home about, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, I like.
It has a really interesting look. It has a different.
It is a very
look.
interesting look. I think it's very there. I think it definitely borrows aesthetically from Turn A slightly.
Yeah,
I want to argue that.
Yeah, which was maybe his last show. Was that his last? Was it Turn A? Was that the last?
I think Turn A
one
came after. Yeah, Turn A came after Victory. So like it would be
last Tomino show.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. But
so it's.
I think Turn A is definitely better though.
Turn A is
way better than G-Reco.
But
if
they look similar. They have very interesting. They have a great look. What I really like in G-Reco, it's funny they had time to animate eye catches, but they didn't have time to animate an opening or an ending.
Or
there's a lot
like
of eye
the
catches.
LEDs on like the mobile suits. They didn't like animate the lights or anything. It's just like kind of like MS Paint fill-in paint bucket type tool stuff going on. If you're gonna watch G-Reco, I would say go with the compilation films. There's 5. The first one is called Go Core Fighter from 2019. The second one is Bellary's Fierce Charge from 2020. Then The Legacy of Space 2021. Shouting Love into a Fierce Fight 2022. And then The Crossing the Line Between Life and Death from 2022. If you're gonna watch G-Reco or at all curious about G-Reco, just watch the compilation films. They have better animation. They have like the updated like Blu-ray animation that came out with the G-Reco Blu-ray. And this is kind of like the better way to honestly watch G-Reco because I think the anime kind of slogs sometimes. And
it's another thing too where it's full of great ideas.
Yeah.
And it has some very Tomino storytelling.
Oh yeah, definitely. But we
talking about Turn A next?
No, not yet. Not yet.
Which one's next?
We are now entering the alternate timelines.
Oh, okay, well I guess.
But the first spin-offs, really. So we're not at Turn A yet.
Okay.
But we have left the Universal Century.
We'll get back to Turn A.
However, we're not really done with the Universal Century yet, but we have left it.
Okay.
This sounds confusing, but we'll address it when we get there. I think you know what I'm talking about.
I don't. I'm eager.
Okay. So, alternate universes and timelines in Gundam.
Okay.
There are a bunch, and this I think half the franchise is essentially alternate universes and timelines.
Right.
First one to start with, Mobile Fighter G Gundam from 1994. I think this was actually the first Gundam spinoff. It's not the first to come to the West, but it is the first spinoff of the Gundam franchise.
Yeah, it's from like the mid 90s maybe, right?
Yeah, like 1994 to 1995,
right.
49 episodes. It is a straight up shonen action super robot anime. I think it's actually a wuxia anime.
Yeah, it's a little wuxia. Yeah, it's like a little. It's a kung fu. It's definitely a kung fu.
Yeah,
like
definitely.
the robots do a lot of. There's a boxing robot.
There is a kung fu robot.
There's a kung fu robot.
There's
but even Shining Finger's kind of a kung fu.
Well, because Domon does karate.
Right.
Like his entire thing is karate. Then.
But Master Asia is kung fu, right?
Yes. I can't remember what their school is called. But I think it has a Japanese name. I can't remember though.
Okay, maybe Master Asia is karate too. Then there's definitely people who do kung fu.
Yeah,
there's definitely people who do kung fu.
And there's also like a fencer.
Yep.
And
there's a French guy who has like a Rose Gundam with fences.
I think that's the name actually. Rose Gundam. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I like G Gundam a lot. I love G Gundam. It's such a good like Gundam but a super robot type show.
G Gundam has a massive
fan base. No, yeah, there are hardcore G Gundam fans.
Yeah.
And they will defend this show like to the bitter end.
Yep.
And I don't blame them. G Gundam's great.
Yeah, it definitely also set the alternate timelines off on a really good start.
Right. Something so different, something so like out there and stuff like that. It's
kind of a what if.
Yeah.
And it's a really, really good what if. And it's full of like amazing, fun characters. It's got just 90s anime nostalgia kind of galore.
Right.
Like just colorful and vibrant and like silly and playful.
And it's just a straightforward tournament arc, really.
Yeah, it's just the whole thing's a tournament arc, basically. And lots of really fun racist
problematic depictions.
Yeah, problematic Gundam designs, because basically
not even just Gundam designs, but the colony
the
designs,
characters,
the
colonies themselves. Yeah,
because I think the Mexico colony, like Neo Mexico, is a sombrero. Yeah, like it's a flying sombrero or flying cactus or something like that in space.
And the Gundam that represent it is the Tequila Gundam.
Yeah, which
I don't know. I think it's great.
I mean, there are Tequila Gundam fans.
It's a perfect time capsule.
Yeah, honestly, it perfectly encapsulates what Japan kind of really
Yeah,
thought of the rest of the
where
world.
where they were in 1994. But it's great, and I will say that the setup is really, really funny and satisfying. It's basically like the whole world is like the whole world government is decided by who wins the big robot fighting tournament.
Yeah. And then there's this undercurring subplot or overarching plot in the background with this thing called the Devil Gundam, which is a hybridization of bioorganic technology and stuff like that. It's like part robot, part human, whatever. That's more of like the overarching story, but the whole straightforward is just hey, we fight to determine which space colony has the most power amongst the other space colonies by sending a representative fighter for some reason. It's such a like novel concept.
Yeah, it's really funny, and the way they control their robots is different because almost what was so unique about Gundam in the first place was the way in which it actualized giant robots as a form of military.
They got like two.
complex.
What are they called? 2 joysticks or whatever.
Exactly.
And then they got the pedals.
They're the real interactive
and a
controls.
keyboard
Yes,
and like
exactly.
CRT screen.
Yeah, and like macros, and you get a real sense and idea of how a giant robot may be used as like as a military tool. And this show discards that entirely.
Where it's just like, hey, you just put on this goo.
Yeah.
Put on this goo and you can pilot.
You just put on your spandex and you pose in a giant like green screen, and now robots are gonna fight.
Oh, another interesting thing is the damage. You also take damage as a pilot because like damage dealt to the machine deals damage to you, which I think would just be like a really weird kind of thing to just.
I'd call it bad game
program?
design. I'd call
But
that bad
again-
game design. If you try to integrate that into a video game I'm playing, I'm out of here.
Now, G Gundam is also probably one of those Gundams that a lot of people in like the States probably were exposed to the earliest.
Yeah, definitely. It was one of the Toonami.
I would say that a lot of people
Gundam
that started
shows.
with G Gundam, it definitely skewed their perception on what the rest of the Gundam franchise is as a whole.
Yeah.
Not to say that G Gundam doesn't play on the tropes or use the tropes that are commonly found throughout the other Gundam shows and Gundam animes and movies, but the fact that G Gundam is so different from what is typically expected from a real robot anime, let alone a Gundam anime.
Yeah. I would say of the spin-off shows, I'd say it plays with the tropes of 0079 maybe the least.
Yeah. I don't disagree. I think it kind of just like picks and chooses really from all across like UC really.
But also even just from Super Robot animes.
Yeah. No, definitely. But would you recommend it as like your first watch into the Gundam franchise?
I actually could. It wasn't mine. I know it was a lot of people who still enjoy the Gundam expanded franchises with me did. So I know that you can stay with it from there. But I do also know that if you like it particularly the most, you might prefer super robots to real robots.
Yeah, that's fair.
So I'm with you that it could be a little misleading about the experience, but it is really, really good. I mean, it's just like craftsmanship and like fun. It has like the spirit of kind of excitement and vibrance of 90s anime, a simpler time of anime. Yeah, it's really, really good.
I definitely really like G Gundam. I think we both agree it's like, start here with the caveat of maybe it'll skew your perception of Gundam, maybe it won't, but just be warned that this is something that maybe will skew your perception.
Yeah, but it's also just very unique too, and that's I'd say is a selling point rather than an attraction.
Which brings me to the next spin-off, 1995's Mobile Suit Gundam Wing. Actually, I think it's Mobile Report.
Yeah.
Is it Mobile Report Gundam Wing or something like that? In Japan, something like that?
Yeah.
It's Mobile Suit Gundam Wing here.
Yeah.
This was the first Gundam anime to get sent over to the West and localized in the West on Toonami.
Yep. This is how I got in. This is how a lot of people got in. I love this show. Best music of all Gundam, in my opinion.
That's a big claim right there.
Just communication. Like these are some of the best songs. I mean, Relina Safari, your mileage may vary, but the two openings I think are the two best openings in all of Gundam.
Just communication and rhythm emotion.
Yeah. And I think the animation that goes with them. It's also in the 90s. The animation at the beginning of the episode and the animation like within the episode starts to get like very different in quality. So the openings are really, really crispy. They're really clean, and I will say that it was especially fun as a kid. So I didn't pick up on like the Bishonen kind of tropes as a kid.
Right.
I don't think I didn't really even knew what Bishonen was. Obviously, almost all anime.
So I think this
had
was
that
also
stuff
like
when we
the
were
first
kids.
Gundam anime to like really push it though.
Right, definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. But it was also because I didn't have other Gundam to compare it to, and because there was a lot of Bishonen stuff in anime at the time.
Right.
You know, like
They were appealing to the female demographic very heavily.
yeah, in the 90s in particular. So these guys didn't stand out from Tuxedo Mask for me like too much. So I didn't really pick up on that, but it was cool that there were a bunch of robots and you got to pick your favorite one. Sandrock was my favorite. Each of my friends had a different favorite.
Personally, I'm part and partial to the Death Scythe.
Yeah, you're
And then the Epion and the Tall Geese.
yeah, those are your favorites. I'd say, I don't know. I do love the Wing Zero.
There's so many wings.
Yeah.
There's the Proto Wing, the Wing Gundam, Wing Zero.
I'm thinking of the custom. I'm thinking of the one
Proto
from,
Wing Zero, and then the Wing Custom EW.
Yeah, I'm thinking of Endless Waltz. I had a really, really good video game for the Super Nintendo, Endless Duel. That game fucking rules. But yeah, Gundam Wing is awesome, and I do think that for a lot of us anime boomers, it was probably our gateway.
There's also I'm glad you mentioned Endless Waltz, the sequel movie. Mobile Suit Gundam Wing Endless Waltz, released in 1998. It is a direct sequel to Wing, so it's not like you can just watch Endless Waltz and
basically a really long episode. It's a really long Christmas episode, and it's sick.
Yeah, no, Endless Waltz is actually really, really good. Do you need to watch it?
The designs are so sick.
Do you need to watch it? Not necessarily for like the story of Wing, but it does kind of finish off like essentially what the story is. And if you're a fan of the manga, you do have to watch Endless Waltz to read Glory to the Losers.
Yeah. There is a lot of, and there's like, it's really funny because Wing has like nowhere close to the fandom that G does, but there's more supplemental materials for it.
Yeah.
Like Frozen Teardrop, there's still like a lot of whispers of like, there's more Wing coming.
Yeah.
You know, like it could happen.
Well, Wing is huge. I think like, as you mentioned before, the Bishonen aspect of it really pushed it into the next level of popularity, essentially.
Right, and there's the materials that are for it they almost follow more Bishonen kind of storytelling tropes than they do like real robot kind of storytelling tropes. Like the main character gets frozen, so he like stays like eternally
young.
youthful. It's like it really, but it's also there's something if you like anime and its weirdness, like Gundam Wing has got like a lot of the fun, quirky kind of. Especially 90s Bishonen kind of stuff.
I think quirky is the perfect descriptor for Gundam Wing.
Yeah,
it's the quirky Gundam
Yeah,
anime.
it's super quirky.
It's definitely kind of an inversion of the plot. Instead of it being an Earth force, fighting against rebel space noids, it's space noids trying to rebel against a dictatorial or authoritarian Earth government.
Right.
Which is like a really cool inversion of like what we had expected at the time.
I do love though that in the 90s the terrorists in anime are always the good guys. You know what I mean? But it's awesome for me. Like whether it's Avalanche in like Final Fantasy VII or it's Operation Shooting Star.
Yeah.
Like the terrorists are the good guys, and I think that's a really spicy, cool thing about 90s anime. 9/11 ruined everything.
Oh my god.
No more good guy terrorists in anime.
But yeah, so Wing as a starting point. I think it's perfectly fine to start with Wing.
I mean, a lot of us did, so certainly it didn't stop us.
Yeah, and I mean, clearly people stuck around, so it's not like
it's got good designs, good music, animation's good.
Like the Gundam team trope is very common, so it's not
that's
like
true. It's actually some. The funny thing is that some shows that came later almost tackle remaking Wing. So,
which I think when we get to talking about 00, we'll definitely touch back on that. But the next one is After War Gundam X from 1996. Another spinoff. This is like the Mad Max Gundam anime. I feel like that's what a lot of people coin it as.
Way edgier than the two before it.
Yes. It is the only spinoff with new types.
Okay, sure. That makes sense.
Also, you kind of do need the context of 0079 just to get why After War Gundam X exists, just conceptually.
Okay.
I like it.
I don't know anyone who's ever started with it.
Yeah, me neither.
I've never met anyone who started with it. Especially because when Toonami was bringing us a lot of that era of Gundam, that was not one of the parts that they brought. We got G,
Yeah.
we got Wing, we got like
Turn
some,
A,
yes,
yeah.
we got like this a bunch of '90s Gundam out of like just a broadcast cable channel, and X was not part of it.
Yep.
At least if they broadcast it, I never saw it.
I think it may have a dub, an ocean dub or something like that.
Sure.
Probably aired in Canada or maybe in Europe. I
Mhm.
wouldn't be surprised. I don't want to like stake my name on that or anything, but I like After War Gundam X. However, as a starting point into the Gundam franchise, probably not a good introduction really. There are character archetypes that are borrowed from X that are used later on in other series.
Well, it's a popular Gundam too.
Yeah,
Like the suit itself is popular.
like the X and the double X and stuff like that.
Yeah, like the moonbeam cannon or whatever
Right.
is like pretty popular.
But
I will say I like within the fandom, if you're on, the Facebook groups or if you're in Reddit or whatever, there's a vocal fandom for this show.
yeah, definitely.
But I've never heard of anyone start.
Yeah, no. And I don't think I can recommend anyone start there either.
Yeah.
Really.
I suppose I wouldn't either.
Which then brings us to what I was mentioning earlier, with the whole we're done with the Universal Century, but not really done with the Universal Century.
Mm-hmm.
So the Gundam timelines, everything we have discussed so far, all converge at a certain point, way, way, way far flung into the future, where the calendar system changes again, and we enter a convergent timeline known as the correct century. And the correct century is the setting for 1999's Turn A Gundam.
On a Gundam.
Turn A Gundam. I love Turn A. Like, Turn A is so good.
I love Turn A as well.
I think for a long time this was like a really, really underrated Gundam anime, and in more recent times it's kind of gotten this resurgence. It and G-Reco are kind of called like the Ghibli Gundam animes.
Right. They do have both of them have a unique animation style. They are both quite quirky, I think, as well, actually. But I do think that, Turn A is just a better show than G-Reco.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's really ambitious. It tries to do a lot of really interesting things, and a lot of them pay off in really satisfying ways. Music's so good, designs are really good.
Yep.
Only main Gundam design ever designed by a Westerner. Sydney designed the Turn A Gundam, which is a Gundam with a mustache. But also like gold sumo, silver sumo.
One of the
so
most
sick.
unique Gundam designs.
All the suit designs are amazing.
The Turn X, I love the Turn X.
Yeah.
It's such a cool mobile suit.
I like the sumos a lot.
Yeah.
Sumos are really fun. But they're perfect Sydney design, and watching them like live in
it's
anime
so
feels
alien,
so good. Yes.
even for Gundam.
Yes.
And you're like, oh yeah, this definitely takes place in like the setting for Turn A is it's so far flung into the future that humanity has essentially kind of lost technology or whatever.
They've lost a lot of it.
They've lost a lot of it, and so they're rediscovering technology. And the level of technology that they actually currently exist at during that period of time is like this neo-Victorian era, like this steampunk powered Victorian era, and they're digging up mobile suits, and they call them mobile dolls, I believe. But the white doll or the Turn A Gundam is like the most powerful one, and then.
But it's also it's a crazy piece of
lost ancient technology. It's essentially
it's wildly powerful.
The Turn
beyond
A
anyone's dream,
fighting
basically.
with the X is implied to have caused like the technological reset that like they're experiencing in the correct century. But it's so cool.
It's so cool.
So cool.
One thing that I really like about it is Tomino. This was one of the Tomino made shows. Tomino wanted the main character to be a female Gundam pilot.
Right.
I've
also heard this.
He tried in the late '90s, and Sunrise wouldn't let him get away with it. They wouldn't let him do it. His bosses wouldn't let him do it, and so he came up with this very funny, like quirky, gender bending kind of cross dressing plotline, which is like kind of very '90s anime in general. It reminds me of like Round and a Half.
Yeah, very tropey. Yeah, very typical of the.
But it's funny because he was trying to do it back then, and they didn't finally create a main female Gundam pilot until now. When did Witch and Mercury come out?
2022, 2023.
Yeah.
I mean, I think an argument can be made.
It took them over 20 years.
I think you can make an argument for Chris McKenzie.
Yeah, I suppose, but she's not the main character. She's
that's fair.
She's the female Gundam pilot.
Yeah, she's
not the
Gundam
main
pilot,
character.
but she's not the main character.
And so, like, main character female Gundam pilot, like he tried in 1998, 1999, and but the show has a lot of just feelings of kind of ambition and trying to do something. New
I would argue Turn A has some of the best animation.
Yeah,
hands down.
Definitely of the series.
Yeah, just.
Of the series. Yeah.
It is such a pleasure to look at and watch.
Totally. And the music's great.
Music is fantastic. Like the turn, turn A, turn, turn A
There's something about the whole show that just feels strange, slightly different.
It like
from
kind of just
everything
sucks
else.
you in, really.
Yeah, but it's awesome. I really like it.
But would you say this is a good starting point for anyone who's curious about the Gundam franchise?
No, but there are people who would like it and wouldn't like anything else we've talked about.
That's a fair assessment. I think I would have to agree. It's like if you're gonna start at Turn A, maybe don't. But if you're kind of just here to watch like a quirky one-off kind of thing, Turn A is self-contained enough.
Yeah, totally.
Where like you don't need the context. I think at this point it's so far removed, like you don't necessarily need the context of everything else to understand. Just because it is the last in the timeline doesn't mean you need the pre-contextual knowledge for it.
There's Easter eggs, but it's
Easter eggs.
They're Easter eggs.
Yeah.
But I do think that it's just a great show with interesting whimsy and funniness, and I actually think that's one of those stories where in G-Reco and maybe in like Double Zeta, I think that the Tomino style of like character interaction is really a detriment to the story. Mm-hmm. And in Turn A, a lot of times it just comes off as like quirky and fun and interesting.
Yeah,
I think Poe is really the only main character who really communicates in that way, where she's just shouting at everyone, telling what to do, and that really just comes off as a personality trait rather than.
And even then, it's like kind of seen as like not a positive personality trait, a positive attribution of her.
No,
character.
she's bossy.
Yeah, it's like they literally call her that.
Yeah, exactly.
They're like, oh God, shut up, stop nagging.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it's a great show. I really like it.
So I think a consensus is like if you're just looking for something quirky and self-contained, Turn A is perfectly fine.
Totally.
There's nothing wrong with starting with Turn A. You can definitely get into the other Gundam franchises through Turn A. But yeah.
It's not my suggested starting point. I've never even thought to suggest it to people, but with at gunpoint, I'm like, you could.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, definitely. Which now we're definitely kind of done with the Universal Century.
Right.
We move into the other alternate timelines and universes. The first one of which I think is Gundam Seed from 2002, and then its sequel,
Destiny.
Seed Destiny from 2004. Both Seed and Seed Destiny combined is 100 episodes of anime, and it's essentially like a modern reboot or relaunch or readaptation, reinterpretation, whatever you want to call it, of the original 0079 Universal Century.
Right.
What are your opinions of Seed?
Well, Seed is by far amongst the most polarizing pieces of Gundam media. Wildly popular in its home country. It exists like right on the technological precipice. It's one of the very first. I think it's the first Gundam anime to be digitally animated.
Like I think in its entirety.
Yeah, in its entirety. And it's an important piece of anime history. I remember the hype around it was really, really big at the time, because I think it was the first new Gundam show to come out after Gundam had already been famous in the West. Mm-hmm. So it was highly anticipated over here. I remember New Type magazine was hyping it. They were just describing the animation style as shiny. But I mean, the amount of negative response
I remember the negative backlash.
There was a lot. There still is so much.
There still is.
Yeah. It's so much more popular in Japan than it is in the West. Most Westerners really hate this show.
Super divisive. Yeah. I feel like a lot of people in like the West, just especially Destiny in particular, and in particular Destiny, they just like hate Destiny.
I'm not a fan, if I'm going to be honest. I think like Kira Yamato is maybe the second worst Gundam protagonist.
Wow, that's quite the statement.
He's near the very, very bottom.
Me personally, I kind of really like Seed,
mm-hmm.
And I like Destiny, even with all its flaws. I do think Seed Stargazer from 2006 is the best overall from all like the Seed projects so far.
Well, there's more.
We're getting more Seed. There's a new Seed project, Gundam Seed Freedom, that was announced recently. I think it's a movie.
Seed is such it's so big. It's so massive.
So I remember how you said Wing had the best music.
Mm-hmm.
I would argue Seed like in general, just Seed has the best music.
All right.
From Seed to Seed Destiny to Stargazer, all of it is fantastic. There is not a single like bad track throughout all of it.
We've heard Ryan's take.
Story-wise though, it's kind of hard to defend Seed and Seed Destiny. It's such like a rehash. It's almost like satirical in the way it does things again.
But it's an accelerationist version mm-hmm. of previous plot lines, where they've taken a previous character and then made them too hyperbolic.
It's a maximization of the more subtle tropes that you would expect from the other series.
That's interesting because subtlety is definitely the thing I would not call it.
That's fair.
Subtlety is the furthest.
I
thing
would
from
say
Seed.
that like Seed makes the other Gundam series, even like the bad Tomino directed ones,
seem subtle. Yeah, definitely.
And if you're not a fan of crying, like just expository crying dialogue, Seed is probably not for you either.
It's very emotional. It's like hyper emotional.
But it falls into the Bishonen category, I feel like.
Definitely, it's similar to Wing in that way.
Yep. But also in animation, Seed does look kind of cheap sometimes. I hate to make this comparison, but it kind of does remind me of like early Digimon, with the digital animation and stuff like that. The super saturated colors.
Yeah, the shiny look has not aged well.
Very well. No, neither has the character design.
But also, I don't like the character designs too, because I mean, the thing about it is that every single character
is a recycle like body.
It's the same. It's the same. They're all one. There's one body for every single character in the show. Maybe slightly different heights, different haircut, and different eye color.
So you got skinny guy, muscular guy.
Yeah.
You got lady.
Yeah.
And then like tall lady or whatever.
Or tall lady. Yeah.
That's like wow.
Yeah.
It just makes the show look cheap overall, like especially on repeat watches.
But it's crazy how much of it there is. I mean, there's more Seed than maybe
like a lot of other spin-offs.
I mean, it's like there's UC Gundam, and then there's Seed, and then all the other things exist in fragmentary existence outside compared to Seed. I mean, Seed is there's so much of it. There's so many suits. There's so many spin-offs. I mean, my roommate, I think he was like, "Oh, what about the red frame?" And I was like, "Which red frame?"
Oh yeah, which red frame? That's like that doesn't really narrow it down at all.
He thought Red Frame was a Gundam. Red Frame is a lot of
and then it's like, are you even talking about an Astray model at that point?
Exactly.
But as a starting point into Gundam, Seed, kind of a coin toss, maybe not in my opinion.
If it calls to you, but I just wouldn't suggest it because I don't like it. I'm not going to go around suggesting shows I don't like. But
I mean, I like it, but I like it with the caveat of also, kind of memey, and I kind of like it for the memes. But I also just genuinely kind of like it for what it is or what it's attempting to be.
Well, and for a lot of people, it's the peak of design for the robots.
Oh yes, absolutely. The Infinite Justice is like still one of my favorite design. Like what was
a lot of people's favorite robots.
Yeah. But definitely get prepared for like if you are already invested in the Universal Century at all. Like if you've watched 0079 and Zeta or Double Zeta and stuff like that, a lot of it is going to seem familiar. A lot of it is going to feel like recycled plot points. A lot of it is going to be like a rehash. And get used to, oh my god, they stole the Gundam.
Yeah.
Get used to that. There's a lot of that.
Yeah.
Which, moving on from Seed, the next spinoff, this is something I actually highly, highly recommend, even as a starting point, is Gundam 00 from 2007. One of my personal favorites as well.
I like 00 as well. Although the sequel is tough for me.
Season 2?
Season 2 is, tough.
I like 00 as a whole. 00 Season 1, Season 2, Awakening of the Trailblazers. It's aired from 2007 to 2009 with 50 episodes. I think it's pretty good. I think it's honestly really, really good. The movie gets a bad rap because it has aliens, as if that's not the first time aliens have shown up in Gundam at all. But it's definitely, I think, one of the more interesting parts about 00 is how rooted it is in the early 2000s politics, especially in relation to like the Middle East and stuff like that.
Right. It takes place in AD.
Yep.
It's like a little bit in the future. And yeah, it's a very post 9/11, post-war in Iraq kind of political landscape, and it deals with like marginal identities a lot, marginal like political bodies and like how they interact with a bigger story. But I will say though that in general, my biggest problem with 00 is the first season's quite good. First season's pretty fun, but especially in the second season, almost every character in the show just starts losing plot lines to the main character.
Yeah.
Setsuna gets 90% of the
storyline,
in the second season, and it ends up making you feel like, why do we even have these other characters?
They
build this cool team, like the whole show revolves around a team, except none of the members of the team ever do anything
or contribute towards the end, really, because like Setsuna is just so much stronger at that point.
They've even like stolen a plot line from you ever see the movie Beer Fest?
Yes.
They like kill off a character and then his brother
brother
shows up and they're like, oh, well, we'll just call you his name and we'll pretend like he never died. And it's just like, what the fuck?
He is set up in the first season, to be fair.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it's just...
But no, I understand what your complaint is. Like, what was the point of the sacrifice?
What is the point of the sacrifice? If
Yeah.
you're just going to reintroduce the
It
character
kinda
and pretend that they never die.
It kind of just cheapens the death like, in its entirety. No, that's a
significantly.
very
Makes
fair,
it-
very fair.
And just in general, Setsuna, like for instance, there's one of the coolest robots in like all of Gundam is this one behind Ryan over here called the Susanoo. I love the Susanoo. I think it's really awesome. It's like a samurai bushido kind of robot.
Right.
Through that way.
This one.
Yeah, that one. And it's awesome. It's so cool. And then they hype you up on it for like
The entire season.
Yeah, for an entire season, and then it doesn't do anything.
It doesn't do anything.
Doesn't do anything.
It's piloted by the shark clone of the season, essentially, Mr.
Yeah.
Bushido.
Who also doesn't ever get to do anything.
Graham Acre is cool though. That's the thing.
I like Graham.
I like Graham a lot.
That's the other thing too, though, is like I like Alleluia, I like Graham, I like Lock-On. There's like all these cool characters in the show. I actually really even like the people who are in like the ship. You know what I mean? Who do all like the coordinating.
Celestial
stuff.
Being.
Yeah. Celestial Bingu. I like all those characters. And then they don't do anything. They're irrelevant, especially in the second season. So I like 00. I think it is actually a pretty decent place to jump in. Great mobile suit design is really, really good. Animation. First, probably Gundam show with like a modern, good voice over. So if you like,
even in dub,
if you're a dub fan, I'd say it's a good jumping off point because it's one of the first shows that had a really, really good Western dub. But yeah,
also get ready for grunge rock. Like a lot of grunge. it's very like kind of early 2000s grunge alternative rocky and like
it's a 2007 show for sure.
And aesthetic and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Me personally, I really like 00. I would definitely recommend this as a starting point. Very easy to get into. Kind of got like it's the same deal with like Gundam Wing, where it's like another Bishonen Gundam series.
Yep, all pretty boys.
Yep, and it's Gundam Team as you mentioned before.
Yep.
If you like Wing, I don't see 00. It shouldn't be like super unfamiliar to you, and if you like 00, you should try Wing.
They're very similar.
Yeah, they're very similar.
Very similar.
Yeah.
00 almost feels like a reboot.
I would definitely agree. I definitely agree that like 00 is like kind of like a second attempt at Wing,
right?
Especially like the entire like concept of intervening and trying to stop conflict on Earth.
Wing is way better though at using the full team, giving.
Incorporating the entire team and stuff like that. Yeah, there's some points in 00 where I'm like, okay, what was the point of having this member of the team in this fight or whatever like that? Whereas Wing, I think the team is split up more often than it is in 00.
Mm-hmm.
But as a recommendation, as a starting point, sure.
Yeah,
there's
not bad.
There are worse places to start.
Way worse.
Which moves on to speaking of worse places to start, Gundam Age from 2011. So
yeah, we both hate this show. So.
Yeah, I hate Age.
Yeah,
Age is not good.
Yeah.
Age is very hard to defend. It's very hard to like even say positive things about. Age was a like kind of a reboot of the Gundam franchise, kind of, but directed intentionally at younger audiences and like meant for kids. And even if it's something for kids, like you could take like Gundam seriously.
Yeah,
you don't have to dumb it down to that like extent. And Age just feels like it's too dumbed down.
It also it seems like it was written by people who simply haven't like seen
like a lot of Gundam,
a lot of other Gundam, like especially War in the Pocket, because it's just it is literally like
War in the Pocket, but like the bad message.
Yeah, it's like it's selling like conflict kind of excitement to children. It's like just total glorification of violence for children.
Not even just that. It's also like the concept of the 3 generations. On paper, it's cool. Like telling a story of war and how it affects a family over the 3 generations of members that enter, the military forces and stuff like that, and are Gundam pilots. And that's very interesting. That's very cool. They just don't explore it well enough or deep enough.
Just practically, it's not actually.
It's just it feels like a great Kids Bop greatest hits cover album, if that makes sense, where it's like, oh, we have to introduce the Lala Sune character so that way our first generation main character can have the emotional like depth he needs to have this hatred for his enemies or whatever. And then like the second generation,
well, they're just gonna like fridge her anyway.
Yeah, like first generation is very much just it's rehashing 0079.
Yes,
like abridging it by a lot. It's like super abridged 0079, and then like it's a Kids Bop cover. Age 2 is a Kids Bop Zeta Gundam. And then Age 3, I don't even know what to call Age 3. Age 3 is just, it just doesn't feel like the proper culmination of things that were happening in the previous.
But it's very cheesy too. I mean, it's very like grandpa, like dad and grandson all punching at the same time. Together, it's just like cheesy. It's not that fun. I kind of wish that there was like a like something I could say got me into it. I've watched mostly the highlight reel of this show because I couldn't
That's
get
fair.
into it.
Yeah. Honestly, that's probably the best way to consume it.
Yeah.
The only other way I can recommend it really is the compilation film, which it only received one, and it's only around the second age, which makes sense because the second age is the best age, which is one. It's like that's a very low bar to begin with, but even then, like, you know, relatively speaking, the second age is the best, and the compilation film, Memory of Eden from 2011, it's pretty good. And if that's the only thing you watch of Age, that is fine. You don't need to watch. Honestly, probably just skip Age.
Yeah, I'd skip Age. But I would say though that there are like some of the robot designs are kind of okay.
Yeah.
But the character designs are horrible.
One of my favorite designs from like Gundam designs period, the Black Hound or the Dark Hound, sorry, the Gundam Dark Hound, the Age 2 Dark Hound, comes from Age. It's so unfortunate that's like one of my favorite. It's like such a cool mix of like a Harlock themed like Gundam, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But other than that, Age just sucks.
What I think is also kind of funny. Don't all the ages kind of look like Gashapon?
Yeah.
They all kind of like
well, that's the whole thing because when was that
what they're going for? Because maybe that's what
yeah, no, one of the points in the plot is like they have a machine. It's a fabricator essentially. It's like the Gundam goes out there, it collects data, and then it brings it back to the fabricator, and the fabricator analyzes the data and is like, okay, I'll make you the perfect weapon or the perfect piece of armor to fight this enemy.
Yeah.
And it's just like, that's dumb.
Yeah.
It's like,
I don't just practically it's just not fun. Practically it's just not fun.
Where does it get the materials for this?
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh yeah, I just know the weakness of whatever you're fighting now.
Yeah. I
mean, it just destroys any sense of stakes.
Yeah, there aren't really
and I think it is shaped like a gachapon type deal.
Yeah.
So I think we both agree. Skip Age.
Yeah, skip Age.
Yeah, just skip Age.
Skip Age.
You know, now we enter like the kind of toys to life Gundam series is.
Right.
We're back in AD. Oh, I think I should preface this. There are multiple AD or Anno Domini timelines. We are on the real life is the Anno Domini timeline. And it's implied that 00 is so far in the future that maybe that is our future.
Yeah, well, it's only 300 years, but still, yeah.
But even then, like, you know, Mobile Suit Gunpla Builders G from 2010, like a 3-episode OVA series, also set in the Anno Domini timeline. That's like our world.
Mm-hmm.
Our world. But it's a Toys to Life. And it's not the first venture of Toys to Life that Gundam has done. I think there's like 2 mangas that came out before it that were also Toys to Life by with a similar name of Gunpla Builders or like Gunpla Builder G. But I think it is the first like, you know, anime adaptation of a Toys to Life concept, especially in the Gunpla world.
Right. It's interesting they start creatively addressing the merchandise
of Gunpla. I mean, let's be honest. The franchise probably would not have survived as long as it did without like the entire side hobby of Gunpla.
Totally. I mean, Sunrise probably wouldn't have survived. At least certainly not at the level that it has. Yeah.
Bandai is one of the most profitable companies in the world because of model kits and stuff like that. And I think something like 80% of model kits sold everywhere is like Gundam.
Gundam branded.
Yeah, Gundam branded is like Gunpla.
Yeah, pretty impressive.
So, you know, it's almost like what took them so long to make something in appreciation of like this entire subset of the fandom.
What I will say is I really like about it is that it's creative.
Oh,
it addresses model kit building as a creative pursuit, and it kind of, if anything, if Age is like kind of a mindless celebration of just like punch stuff, Build is like, well, maybe actually Gundams aren't just about war, maybe they're about you know creation
and like a love of the fandom essentially. Which, you know, I think that's a great transition to, well, one, Gunpla Builder is probably not a good place to start necessarily.
Probably not, because it is a lot of just like, I don't know, because it is maybe one of the ones that's more kid friendly.
I only say that because Gunpla Builders is only 3 episodes and it's an OVA series, and it has you kind of with the expectation of knowing like more of like the Gunpla side of the fan base.
That's true.
That's true. I would say
there are a lot of payoffs for long time.
I would say if you were going to get into the Build franchise, start with Build Fighters Try, or Build Divers or Build Divers Re-Rise, and then go back to Gunpla Builders, because Fighters is definitely like Fighters and Fighters Try. You can definitely watch with your like a kid. Like if you're an older Gundam fan, or an older fan of the franchise, an older fan of Gunpla, you can just definitely put this on and watch with a kid, and then you can just enjoy them. And you being the older fan or deeply invested into the franchise is probably gonna notice all the references and stuff like that, because there's a lot of references in Fighters and Try. And for a younger fan, it's probably just like a fun and much more casual and low stakes introduction to the Gundam franchise. And it's not like they give up on the tropes or anything at all. The tropes are there, and if anything, they kind of turn it into like the joke.
Sometimes there are a lot of them are jokes. I will say that the build, I haven't seen Divers, but the first two are almost comedies.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Gundam Build Fighters from 2013, which actually, which has the uniqueness of both having an alien and being a reverse isekai anime and a Toys to Life.
Explain the reverse isekai thing.
So an isekai just means another world. So when you're talking about it in the context of just fiction in general, it means that a person from our world is sent to another world. This is very popular in like anime, like Sword Art Online or Dot Hack or Log Horizon, ReZero, Konosuba.
Time I was reincarnated as something.
As a slime. Time I was reincarnated as whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
Like any reincarnation. Yeah,
any of those. All of those are all isekais.
But
this one's a reverse isekai.
Isekai has existed for like as long as fiction has existed, pretty much. Like the argument can be made that the earliest isekai stories like go back even to like the earliest written pieces of literary fiction.
Yeah, didn't somebody call A Tale of Genji like an isekai or something?
It's like either A Tale of Genji or like the Umaboshi Peach, something like that. It's like the Momotaro or something like that. Like he crosses into the spirit world, which would then technically make it another world.
Yeah,
so it's isekai. But little off track, but reverse isekai basically means it's the inverse of that. Someone from another world has entered our world.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the characters in Build Fighters 2013 is a reverse isekai character. Mm-hmm. He's an alien that comes from another world. He actually lives on a space colony, which is pretty interesting. And he likes to fight with Gunpla.
I think my favorite reverse isekai is Mork and Mindy. Was my favorite,
Generally speaking, though, I think Build Fighters is very kid-friendly, very easy to get into.
I think the franchise gets a little long in the tooth for me, but I think the first one is really fun. Second one, it's diminishing returns pretty much for me.
Definitely diminishing returns. I can't argue with that. But try, if you're a fan of G Gundam, definitely watch Try instead of maybe Build Fighters, because Try definitely goes in for the more G Gundam-esque references. Like the Try burning Gundam is clearly just like, oh, it's just the God Gundam or the Shining Gundam or whatever.
Right.
And Domon actually has cameos in Try.
That's
so
true.
If you're a fan,
he's like someone's master, right?
Yeah. What is his name? The main character, Try Sekai Kamiki or something like that. His master that taught him martial arts is
clearly just Domon
Kashu.
Domon Kashu.
Have you seen this man?
Yeah.
But
one of my problems with Build and with Try is if you actually have seen custom made Gunpla and how ornate and how crazy they are, the stuff in the Build shows just looks like a normal suit comparatively speaking.
It's just like a repaint
and they've maybe switched the weapons or they've switched the loadout.
It's not a super
but it's not like
extreme most of the cases.
And sometimes they'll give you like a little cameo of what that stuff is like. They'll put it on like a shelf somewhere, but they'll never let it like show up in battle, because the truth is they still want to sell you the kit of whatever the new character is,
so that way you can do it yourself. And they want to make it to some extent like, I want to say realistic, because technically anything's realistic when it comes to
things that are not realistic.
Yeah, customizing Gunpla. It's more of just like for the average Joe getting into the hobby, it's kind of just like this is a much more attainable kind of thing.
Well, it's also like, I think they probably have a limit and an idea of how much plastic they're going to use per kit.
Right.
The size of the kit, how much plastic are they going to use.
Right.
And when you talk about those custom kits, we're talking about a lot of plastic.
Right. So moving on to the other 80 Gundam Build series. Yes. Divers from 2018, and then Divers Re-Rise from 2019. I like Divers and Divers Re-Rise. I like them
more than Try?
Kind of a split, because Try, Build Fighters and Build Fighters Try are just straight up comedies, whereas Build Divers and Divers Re-Rise are definitely more into adventure drama, isekai type stuff.
Right.
If you're not into like the lighthearted, like low stakes comedy aspect, then maybe don't watch Build Fighters. Instead, watch Build Divers, because Divers does take its narrative a lot more seriously. There is a plot point in Re-Rise where one of the characters doesn't take the story seriously, and Re-Rise also has aliens, and turns out, oh wait, these aliens are actually aliens and not video game NPCs. So he has this entire crisis where he's like, "You're not gonna." He straight up goes to the main villain of the season and goes, "Yeah, you're not gonna blow up that place. I'll tell you where it is." And he tells him where it is, and the villain goes, "Oh, okay," and fires a laser at that place, destroying it. And you're just like, "Why? But I think a cool thing about Divers is it tackles like you said, the creation aspect of it more, especially in the sense that in Divers, the original Divers, there is this entire thing of artificial life forms being born in this video game
Right.
that they're playing. The main difference between Fighters and Divers being Fighters is a toys to life, whereas Divers is you enter a video game via VR type deal.
Right. It's more like .hack.
Yep, that's a very good
It's
example.
about like living in an MMO.
Yep. But yeah, Divers' entire kind of original premise is like, oh, do artificial like intelligent life forms deserve the same rights or accommodations as regular player characters? And a lot of there's like a line drawn in the sand and stuff like that, and it's super cool. Re-Rise, I would argue, is much better than the original Divers. I know I'm going on for a while, but also it's because you haven't really watched Divers.
No, and I couldn't get into it.
Nor really like Divers.
Truth is, I couldn't get into it. I looked at it and I was like, I don't know about that. So you're welcome to share all your opinions on it, but that was not one that I could find myself getting into.
I think the part of the reason I like Re-Rise much better than the original Divers is one, its vibes are just so much more better, just straight off the vibes, and then the entire concept of the core Gundam, which is what the main character pilots in Re-Rise. It's a mini Gundam, so it's like half the size of a regular Gundam that he has different outfits for, essentially, like these different core fighters that fly in, and like the armor pops off the core fighter and then attaches itself to the Gundam, and they're different colored. It's very much a utility-esque type of deal, which I thought was really neat. And like this seeing how like other Gunpla builders have taken that concept of the core Gundam in real life and like really pushed what you can do with customization with it. I think it's just so cool, and it just makes me like Re-Rise even more. There are ONA episodes for Build Fighters and Build Divers called Battle Logs. These aren't necessary watches. These are more of just like fights between different Gundams from different franchises. Like in the Divers Battle Log, there is the Strike Freedom that fights the Barbados.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Classic.
Yeah. And then in the Build Fighters Battle Log, you have the Reversible Gundam fighting the Zaku 2 Custom. Zaku 2 Custom. It's like a red Zaku 2 Custom. And the whole thing is like it's a rehash of Char versus Amuro. Of
course.
But the fight starts with Ribbons from Double O because he's the pilot of the Reversible Gundam. But the whole thing is because Ribbons Allmark and Amuro Ray
have the same voice actor.
Because Ribbons is essentially like an inverse of Amuro when you actually watch Double O with the context of 0079.
Yeah, he's an evil Amuro.
Yeah, because he's an Amuro that like kind of smelled the bullshit and liked it a little too much. But yeah, no, the battle logs are really neat, and you don't need the context for anything to just like enjoy it necessarily. You can just watch them on their own. And definitely if you have like a younger anime fan that you're trying to introduce to the Gundam franchise, but you're a little bit like hesitant to get them into the much more gritty like war epic stories, then maybe Build Fighters and Build Divers are a good starting point.
I think they're certainly better than Age.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Age is like, I think I put like Age and G Savior like towards the bottom of recommendations. But moving on to the last two, I think the two most popular spin-off series right now is, the first one is Mobile Suit Gundam Iron-Blooded Orphans from 2015.
Another very polarizing show.
Yeah, another very polarizing show. You either love it or you hate it.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of new generation anime fans are
I think really like it. I think it's very popular with the newest fans. I would say like the newest Gundam fans are almost all from IBO.
Yeah. I would agree, but then Witch from Mercury came out, and then I feel like just due to recency bias and stuff like that, I would definitely argue that for a lot of newer anime fans, that their starting or entry point for Gundam as a franchise was probably Iron-Blooded Orphans or something like that. It was another big one to come into the West, and it was really popular. It plays into the more plays in more heavily to the child soldier aspect of the entire Gundam franchise.
So it's very gritty.
Yeah, very, very gritty. There
Everyone's
are
just
no
like bleeding out of their eyeballs. And
yeah,
stuff
there
all
are
the
no
time.
beam weaponry or anything like that, which is like a neat change of pace in my opinion. It's just like just caveman fighting.
Yeah, the Barbatos has a giant club
That just
it
runs
bonks-
around
and it just bonks
bonks.
things with it. Yeah, the Barbatos being the main Gundam from Iron Blooded Orphans, just runs around bonking things with its club.
I think definitely IBO along with Thunderbolt gets the rap of being like the edgy Gundams.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah. I like IBO. It's not a typical Gundam story necessarily. It's definitely an inversion of a lot of the tropes that you would expect.
I don't like the animation style. It's a personal choice. I definitely prefer the next one we're going to talk about animation-wise.
But
music's okay. Design's not my favorite. Characters are interesting, but a lot of them are very tropey.
I'd say actually I like how you mentioned the designs. The Barbados being so vastly different, and the Gundams in Iron Blooded Orphans being so very different from the other Gundams. They're very skinny.
Yeah, the waist is just
Like that's
killed it for
that's a
me.
common complaint that a lot of people have because you're so used to seeing like bulky, boxy kind of Gundams, and then you see, the G frames is what they're called in IBO, and they're so skinny and skeletal and stuff like that. And you're like, well, how is this supposed to be that strong? But as
It's a fictional robot.
Yeah,
so,
it's a fictional robot.
Your mileage,
Yeah.
whatever.
But as a starting point recommendation,
It's worked for a lot of people. I wouldn't suggest it just out of personal bias, but it has worked for a lot of people. A lot of people have come into the fandom. I mean, I still feel like, particularly on some of the forums where people are discussing Gundam day in, day out, I'd say there's a large, maybe the loudest fandom, I think, right now is the Iron Blooded Orphans fandom.
I think IBO fans are kind of like in the same boat as G Gundam fans. They're like,
Yeah,
they're hardcore.
very
They're
loud.
hardcore.
And I think yeah. But I think I'd say it's closer to being where G Gundam has fewer detractors. IBO is closer to being more like Seed, where it's more polarizing.
I definitely agree. I think G Gundam is less polarizing than IBO.
Yeah, but I do think that the IBO has a extremely loud. I think the fandom
Very vocal.
Yeah,
fan
very
base.
vocal.
Yeah, very vocal. Which brings us to the last one to talk about today, the most recent Gundam anime to be released and to finish, Mobile Suit Gundam: The Witch from Mercury from 2022. Actually has 24 episodes and one prologue ONA, which I think is a absolute must watch to just understand the story of Witch from Mercury. I love Witch from Mercury. I really, 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 really enjoyed it. I had very high expectations going in, and for the most part, most of my expectations were met. I fell short, obviously, because nothing ever truly meets every expectation you have, right?
Of course.
But one.
I think a lot of people have been disappointed with the ending.
Oh, okay, that's a fair point. I think the ending is much to be desired, but at the same time, has so much going for it. The animation is gorgeous.
I really like the music and the animation.
The music
character
is
designs are
phenomenal.
really
The character
refreshing.
designs are very refreshing. I agree. The Gundam designs, the mobile suit designs,
They look good.
so cool, so cool. As a starting point, I would say why not? It is the most recent one. I feel like this and IBO for a lot of people, especially in getting into anime or only getting into anime recently, that are very curious about the Gundam franchise. There's no reason not to start with Witch from Mercury or Iron Blooded Orphans. And if anything, for
And a lot of people will
start with Witch from Mercury.
and these two don't need our suggestion because they're the places people would start if they
were curious to begin with.
if they didn't have a suggestion from anyone. Yeah.
So I don't think you can necessarily go wrong with either of those choices to begin with.
Right.
But I think that kind of covers
All the timelines.
all the timelines.
Except for
all the-
SD, we didn't talk about SD.
That's a whole nother topic. That's
All
a
right.
whole nother thing.
I'll
But
save that for another day.
if you were to make a top 5 recommendations, just in general for Gundam, for someone who's never watched the show, is vaguely familiar, they call every giant robot they see a Gundam.
Yeah.
What would your top 5 recommendations be?
Classically, I've been suggesting 8th MS Team and War in a Pocket as the entry points. I do think that they are the best pieces of Gundam media. I think they are amongst some of the best pieces of anime media. So I definitely highly suggest those. But I do think that the alternate timelines, I think, are very digestible, and they fit kind of the pattern of how people get into anime. Because they sit down and watch a season of anime.
Right.
And the alternate timelines offer you that.
Yep. Very seasonal stuff, very easily digestible. Yeah.
But I do think that the OVAs are even shorter, faster watches, and I think the payoff's better. So those are my suggestions.
As for me, I agree. 08th MS team, can't go wrong starting there. I would say just, if it's such a big deal, just bite the bullet. Watch 0079. Just watch the
movie.
trilogy.
Yeah.
They're really good.
Yeah,
They are honestly really, really good. And I think they're like...
And the characters are iconic, beyond iconic.
They're beyond iconic. Yeah. There's so many... To this day, we are drawing, like, even in Western science fiction, like, literature or just television and movies, we are drawing from the tropes and character archetypes introduced in 0079.
Totally. And it's just like it's a turning point in the history of anime.
And then other than that, I guess I would say, like, for a spin-off or whatever, 00, can't go wrong. Wing is very easy, it's very quirky. If you have a friend from like the group in the 90s, they'll probably be totally down to like rewatch Wing with you.
For sure.
And like the recent stuff like IBO or Witch for Mercury, those are very easy jumping in points as well.
Yeah.
Definitely for the younger fan. If you have a younger anime fan that you're trying to watch Gundam with, maybe stay away from the more gritty stuff. If you're that hesitant to show it to them, but honestly, they could probably handle 0079.
Yeah.
Like, just show them 0079.
No, it's true. I mean, the really gritty, edgy stuff kind of came out of the OVA era. So a lot of the earlier TV shows maybe they have heavy themes, but they don't have heavy.
I honestly think the most gruesome deaths in 0079 don't occur until
on screen, even
not even on screen, because don't occur until the end of the third movie, really, like the last 20 minutes or so.
Yeah, I suppose that's true.
Like, that's like the most violent the movies tend to get. After that, it's like, before that, there's not really much.
The characters also die on off screen
a lot,
for the most part.
Not a lot of blood.
Yeah.
But
it's a space opera.
Yeah, definitely. But I think that kind of covers everything.
Well, I mean, I think that what we need to do is implore people as to why.
Oh, you know what? You're right. Why should you watch Gundam, Griffin?
Why should you watch Gundam? So I think Gundam, more than any other piece of anime media, will Mr. Miyagi wax on, wax off you through like the history of anime. I do think that if you care about anime, I think that Gundam's worth taking a look at. That's my personal feeling, my personal bias. I do think that like each of these different pieces of Gundam media exists at an interesting crossroads, different interesting intersection in the history of anime. I think that if it weren't for the real robot genre, if it weren't for Macross and the original Gundam 0079, the golden age of anime never would have happened. If it weren't for the Gundam OVAs, anime wouldn't have continued to grow into more and more adult subject matter. You can watch the digital transformation happen at the turn of the millennium in Seed. You can see exactly how good hand-drawn animation got before that we abandoned it in Turn A. There's so much to learn about anime within the Gundam.
I think that's an incredibly fascinating point you make. Definitely, like, the history of anime is kind of the history of Gundam, or like vice versa to an extent. Like,
I mean, even when we talk about other great shows, Sunrise wouldn't be anything without Gundam. Gundam is Sunrise, and Sunrise is Gundam. And if it weren't for Sunrise, we wouldn't have Cowboy Bebop. I wrote down a little list here: Escaflown, Code Geass, Tiger and Bunny, City Hunter, Outlaw Star, Dirty Pair, Inuyasha. I mean, Sunrise's list of contributions to the anime canon is just is undeniable.
Well, I mean, Sunrise is just a licensing / distribution company.
Yeah, but if it weren't for Gundam, there'd be no Sunrise.
I mean,
maybe these shows would still exist, right? But the problem is, when you look at most of these shows, especially the ones at the top of this list, Hajime Yatate is like the most important creator, right? And that's just a pseudonym for the Sunrise staff.
Yeah. I mean, I don't disagree with Sunrise contributions to the genre, but I think as for why Gundam is such like the same reason like I would give for like an American or just in general someone in the West never watched Star Wars or Star Trek. It's like, what are you doing? Like, how are you not
curious?
Like, even in the slightest. It's so integrated into the cultural zeitgeist at this point. It's like we what?
But they are fun too, like when you start up War in a Pocket, you don't feel like you're sitting in for like an anime history lesson. You're like watching you're watching Zeon Special Forces.
Like none of these are history lessons at all, really. They're just like, if you are aware of the relevant history, you can extrapolate information from it. But in general, like, each of them are such wonderful narratives, honestly.
Yeah, really good stuff.
And it's such a weird thing to be like, why should you watch it? Well, because it's been around for so long, everyone talks about it for the most part. A lot of people are just
But there's
straight
a lot
up
of people
inspired by it.
I know, but a lot of people do, especially, I watch a lot of people talk about anime on the internet, and I've noticed like a very subtle trend where people think that Gundam is the part of anime they can ignore.
That's such like an anti kind of opinion.
But these are very influential kind of people who really appreciate the medium, and I do think that you can actually grow your appreciation for the entire medium by engaging with it.
That's absolutely.
Yeah.
But yeah, just watch Gundam. It doesn't hurt. If anything, you'll probably enjoy yourself.
Think about the amount of people who have watched Ava but have never watched Gundam and have no idea how much of Ava is about Gundam.
Well, that's like, I can make the same point of like how many people have watched Ava and haven't watched like Kamen Rider or Ultraman.
Sure, but I'm just saying that some of these things I think are you'd be shocked and intrigued. I think at like how integrated these inspirations.
And if you're like fan of modern anime and modern mecha, yeah, it's probably inspired by Gundam.
Yeah, definitely.
Especially like if it's in the real robot genre. Like if you're a fan of Full Metal Panic. That's like, what do you mean you don't want to watch Gundam?
I hope that people, kind of take a second to look at it. And I hope that maybe Gundam can have a new golden era where people are kind of appreciating it and giving it a chance. It's not going away anytime soon.
Yeah, there's definitely more projects announced, and even if you're like, there's definitely a multitude of avenues to quell curiosities about the franchise. Like if you're just in it for the anime, just watch the anime then. If you're more into manga, then you can read the manga. Yeah. If you prefer video games, they're hard to come by. They are hard to find.
Yeah, some of them are good.
You may have to be a little creative on your methods of acquisition.
Some are really good.
A little yo-ho, a little yar-har. But a lot of them are actually very, very solid games. They're really good.
One of my favorite things when I first went to Japan in 2014, I was first of all shocked to find that game centers or arcades in Japan were mostly one game per floor. Because I walked in thinking, they have
there's like a Tekken floor or like a SF4 floor and stuff like that. Yeah,
exactly. But one of the floors that I walked into in Akiba was the floor that was all Gundam Versus.
Oh my god.
And that was just
that sounds so cool.
And the Sandrock had just come out in the game, and it had never been out before. And so I was there within a couple of weeks or months of it coming out. And that was really, really fun. Yeah, that's a great game, by the way. Really, really good. A staple of the Japanese arcade scene.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, no. What's stopping you from getting into Gundam? Really, nothing. Yourself. Just do it. I don't think I have anything else to add. You, Griffin?
No, I think I'm good. This was a nice conversation. I love going down memory road on the Gundam stuff.
I guess that wraps it up. This was also our inaugural episode, so thank you for anyone who has watched to the end. This has been a very long recording session.
Yeah. How deep are we in?
We're over 2 hours and 30 minutes into.
Well, then we've got time for one more question.
Maybe,
what's your favorite?
It'll probably be under 2 hours 30 minutes after we cut it down a little bit here and there, but we'll see.
We'll see.
But,
favorite Gundam science technology gimmick? What's your favorite one? That's my closing question.
Closing question
from
is
any
Gundam franchise.
Mine. I'll just give you my example. Mine, orbital elevators in 00.
Oh, okay. The orbital elevator. I wasn't thinking that. I was thinking what causes the machines to move.
Yeah. Oh, you mean like particles, Minovsky particles?
Yeah.
Versus
to answer your question,
Plavsky particles.
I do have an answer for this.
Okay,
and I've thought about this for a very, very long time.
Cool. What's your favorite?
It is in 0079. It is in the third episode, first movie if you're watching in the movies, and it's when the white base is trying to escape the Side 7 colony, and then a hole is breached into the hull. So this one guy walks over to the side of the wall. He pulls a lever, and these pink bubbles float out of the wall,
and then seal the hole,
and then pop on the hole and seal it. I was like, yeah, that's fucking cool.
I also really, really like that. That's a really, really good one.
Oh, and the other one is also from 0079. It's when the Gundam is entering atmospheric reentry, where Amuro goes, oh, there is an atmospheric reentry system. And then he presses a little thing on the keyboard, and then the belt buckle of the Gundam pops open, and this little plastic sheet kind of goes over it. And it's what keeps it cool during atmospheric reentry.
Yeah. The fact that I do love how symbolic the re-entry scene is.
Yeah.
Like, because it represents this thing that none of the other robots can do.
Oh,
and it gives
yeah,
you that,
yeah.
that tingly feeling like this is something special. This is something magic. Something
And like
important
atmospheric
happening.
reentry is another one of those tropes that keeps coming back up over and over and over again. It is such a cool action set piece. It's like we lost communication because there's too much heat. And literally, we're being sucked in by Earth's gravitational force.
Right, totally. But I really like that. What I like about the elevators is it's kind of funny because so what the elevators are, for anybody who doesn't know about this is an actual sci-fi kind of theory, is that you build like a little elevator that goes from Earth out
to space
into lower orbit, right? And at the top of that, they basically run giant like solar panels.
Yeah.
And the solar panels sends power down to the power grid on
and
Earth.
like it takes less time for solar energy to get there. You actually capture more solar energy because it doesn't have to go through the Earth's atmosphere and be filtered through like all the ozone layer and stuff like that.
Right.
So
but they also use it to get things in and out of space too.
Yeah.
And so it's like an important
part of trade, like all that. And there's only 3 solar elevators in Double O.
And the 3 world governments have like
it's essentially just China, Europe, it's China, Europe, and like America.
Yeah,
for the most part,
it's like Europe and Africa, China and Russia, and then America, like Japan, China, Australia, stuff like that. But they've kind of cloisterously controlled the power and the influence of these elevators, and I just love the geopolitical kind of fallout of these world governments kind of monopolizing this infrastructure.
The fact that like countries in the Middle East are just vying for not just power but relevancy in this world without fossil fuels. Which is super relevant, especially at the time it was released.
Totally.
And it's funny that you mentioned like the solar elevator being just a science fiction concept. Science fiction concepts show up like that all over Gundam. Like
it's one of the things I think is most fun about the show.
Space colonies. Yeah. Those are just O'Neill cylinders, which was introduced in a science fiction novel. I think like 7 years before Gundam was released. So essentially, this was just a concept in sci-fi that was existing floating around in the 70s. So Gundam is just as important, I feel like, to the science fiction genre as a whole as contributors to the genre like the William Gibson with is it Neuromancer?
Sure.
Yeah, and like you have Snow Crash that are like integral to like the cyberpunk genre.
I'm not gonna put Gundam up against Philip K. Dick anytime soon, but I will say that some of the ways that it explores some of the ideas that are popularized in kind of futurism, that's kind of why it's so cool that Sid Mead designed a Gundam, because he's like one of our greatest futurists, right? And like the way that like futuristic ideas and ideas of futurism are explored in a narrative through Gundam, it's one of the most rewarding parts of the show.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think all that we're missing now is where's our Dyson sphere in Gundam?
Yeah. I'm sure that's the thing. There's so many new ideas that haven't been explored, and they're always going to keep finding new ways to kind of play with them. Right. I think it's the best.
And as a franchise, I hope Gundam goes on for a much longer time. Like it just keeps going.
Yeah, me too.
I hope that generations and generations of anime fans down the line will still have Gundam anime or Gundam properties to new ones to look forward to and to watch and be introduced to the franchise with.
Yeah, at least until somebody launches a colony into us,
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think we're closer to space colonies than we were back in the 70s. But
We'll see. That's the thing that I think is so funny too, though. In some ways, they it does feels like technology gets better all the time, but it mostly feels like only communications technology has improved lately. Like I know that now we can land rockets,
back down,
but we can't even go to the moon. We used to be able to go to the moon. Now we can't go to the moon.
Oh, is this just a cost thing? What are you talking about? Are you seriously going with moon conspiracies right now? We can still go to the moon. It's just expensive.
We have been to the moon.
Yeah.
But we don't have the infrastructure to do it anymore.
Yeah, because we won the space race.
Yeah. It doesn't feel like much of a win. We don't use it very much.
Well, we don't need to. We don't have the necessary. It's more expensive and more resources spent to go to the moon and sustain human life on the moon than resources we would get back from the moon.
Doesn't make me feel closer to space colonies.
I mean, just live on the ISS then.
Why not?
I mean, does it have to be the moon?
I'm just saying that moving humans into space is an exciting concept, and I don't disagree. We don't seem that much closer to it today than we did 10 years ago.
What are you talking about? We have the ISS.
Yeah, we've always had the ISS.
What do you mean? No, we haven't always had the ISS.
Yeah, we've had it since the early 2000s, haven't we?
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Sorry, I thought you meant like Indian from like
History of
the
mankind.
space travel.
Yeah, we've always had the ISS since the 1400s. I'm just saying that I think that we have lowered our ambitions in space in the last couple decades.
Well, I mean,
and I think that media like this is exciting because it gets you reinvigorated on the ideas of.
I think there are some
humans into the.
There are some more nuances that I think you aren't taking into context when it goes into the entire human migration into space in real life, like the whole. Who can afford to really live in space in that case?
What I mean, it's considered. That's the thing, though. If we considered it like
no,
a public good to continue investing in space, that's the thing. There wasn't necessarily like a benefit to going to the moon. We believed that it had a benefit, and that created a benefit.
Well,
we invested in it anyway.
The benefit was the Cold War and the space race. That was like the only real benefit. The benefit was just kind of propaganda in a sense.
Sure.
And like a sense of nationalistic pride.
Yeah, but like good things came out of it. Like a lot of actual advancements in technology.
Yeah, I don't deny it. I don't deny that, but you can't say it's for the altruistic reason of just advancing humanity into space.
But it's why we should have been doing it. It's why we should have been doing it.
I mean, yeah, sure. But the reality is, like, it's not like Gundam, where in Gundam's case, it's like the rich people live on Earth and the poor people get sent into space. I think in reality, it's probably going to be the inverse of that, where it's like those who can afford to live in space will probably get sent to space.
I mean, we don't know. We have no idea how this is going to
That's fair, too.
Because, like, if people are mining the asteroid belt for precious materials, who knows?
There's an exponentially larger quantity of precious minerals and materials outside of Earth than there are on Earth, so it only makes sense to just start mining stuff from asteroids and stuff like that.
These are just little steps, and they're the kind of steps that when I was a kid I thought we were closer to than it turns out we were. I didn't think I'd be 35 years old.
I mean, we are closer than when you were a kid.
We haven't made the kinds of ambitions that I maybe would have imagined.
I mean,
certainly not from watching things like Gundam.
I think if you're watching Gundam and going, damn, I can't wait till I'm 40 and can pilot a robot, I think your expectations might be slightly skewed.
That's not what I mean, and you know it.
But no, I guess yeah. So you'd live in space?
Sure.
In a space colony, or like on a moon colony, or
if I could live on a cylinder, I'd probably do it. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I actually, I think that one thing would be cool. A lot of people complain about live action anime, but one thing that I think would be cool about doing live action adaptations of some of the Gundam material would be creating a more lifelike vision of what those spaces would look like.
I think if anything, like for live action anime adaptations, which I don't think anyone is really taking advantage over, is the more hard sci-fi stuff should on paper be easier to adapt.
I agree. It would just feel more natural.
Yeah, I mean, Ghost in the Shell is clearly, obviously, like an example of a failure of that. But at the same time, it's like on paper, this should have worked.
Yeah, this maybe should have worked. No, I agree. We could go down.
We can go down that rabbit hole.
We could definitely do a Ghost in the Shell. But yeah, no, I mean, I agree. Like the hard sci-fi things maybe should be, especially because when you're watching a lot of things people have a problem with about anime is like, well, what nationality are these characters, or what should they look like? They're just a cartoon character. Like there's like no one in One Piece has an ethnicity.
Yeah, they do.
Do they?
Yeah, Oda has like a entire thing.
Well, but in Gundam they do. In Gundam they have very specific kind of national backgrounds and things like that. Things would be easier to deal with in like casting and things.
Well, I mean, Gundam also is like the theme is transhumanism to an extent.
There are some transhumanistic themes.
So, I mean, as a whole, there's a lot going on in Gundam. There's a lot for a lot of different people, and there's a lot to dissect. Definitely. I think what we've done is just given such a very shallow overview of like just generally speaking what to expect and what we recommend and stuff like that.
And there's only so much we can cover in 3 hours,
honestly. But I think this is a good stopping point.
Yeah, let's leave them one more.
All right. So I mean, thank you for anyone who's still watching, anyone who's still getting to the end of the video. Thank you for watching once again. I'm Ryan. This is Griffin. Bye.
Later.